Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of May 9th, 2024. First item on tonight's agenda is to discuss and approve the April 11th, 2024 draft minutes. I think some of us have given comments in. Any additional comments on the minutes, discussion?
Do you have my comments, or do I need to do
No,
I actually wrote a paragraph, I think that sums are, so Deirdre, I'm sorry, Deirdre or Deirdre?
Deirdre.
Okay, see? I questioned myself. On page 5 of 7, down towards the bottom, underneath the paragraph that says the applicant provided information on a sound attenuated enclosure for the generator, blah, blah, blah. So, third paragraph from the bottom. Okay, so underneath that, the planning board indicated the 4 heat pumps and 1 condenser on the west side of the property will need to be screened. Planning board will need plans indicating the type and length of the planned screening. Does that sound? Okay, do you want me to send it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Wasn't there also about screening about the HVAC?
Yeah, everybody should
That's
turn their
what-
mic on. If they're
That's
on.
that's what I'm talking about.
Both the HVAC and the generator?
Mike Dan.
You got it.
Microphone.
Forward, screen. Oh, demo's
Sorry.
done. There you are.
That's,
Just noting, I believe that there was questions on both screening for the generator in the corner of the lot as well as the HVAC directly adjacent. That's what we're talking about.
yes. So in the minutes, it was talked about the generator screening, but not the HVAC. Let's see, how do I share this?
Other comments, any? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Make a motion.
Lee? Second from Barbara, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, our next planning board meeting is June 13th. Cindy, do we have any potential public hearings on for that yet, or we don't know yet?
As of now, no.
No? Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is Fred Hall from the Port Jefferson and Bridgeport Ferry Company to give us a conceptual plan to improve traffic flow on East Broadway. And I think, Fred, you're all set up on the,
I think everything's up, but just
Okay.
in case, I have paper.
okay. White?
Oh, okay.
You want paper?
Yes, please. Thank you for that.
Oh, okay. With me tonight is Harold Jacobson, who is our port engineer and generally in charge of projects like this. He's overseeing the construction of the new building here.
Okay. Fred, if you wouldn't mind, maybe take a seat here, because we don't have a mic set up on the podium yet.
Oh, yeah, we can share.
Okay, well, I've got plenty.
Oh, then.
Yeah, we can share. Too much paper. Yeah, just watch the cords. There's
Yep.
cords all over the place.
Good evening, and thanking everybody for allowing us to be here and make a proposal that I think will greatly improve traffic on East and West Broadway. As I'm sure you're all familiar, we have a problem with people making U-turns, 3-point turns, illegal turns into the ferry property. And there have been attempts with the placement of bollards on the street to try to alleviate that. It has not worked to date. And the excuse when people come in is, my GPS told me to do it. So we have a problem with the GPS. I actually had a discussion with the mayor about trying to get the GPS folks to make it clear that there is no left turn allowed there. I tried several years ago. The company said, we see the problem, we have no interest in fixing it. So it looks like there'll be no help from that point of view. So what we basically are proposing here is to take a little bit off of the sidewalk on the Danford side. It's about 2.5 feet. That would still leave 5 feet of sidewalk, which I believe is the minimum ADA requirement, and that would be intact on this proposal. That would allow restriping of the various lanes of traffic and allow us to put temporary, meaning traffic cones, to delineate various lanes when we're really busy, all the way up to the entrance to Danfords. We're not proposing to put in permanent bollards by any means. I talked with Steve Gallagher. He did not like that concept at all, but he said he could live with cones during very busy periods of time. So that's basically what we are proposing. We propose that the company will do the construction. We're not looking for the village to do it. We will take care of it. But we're here to find out what people are thinking, and have we made any serious errors in our thinking, and
I'm just curious, cones, when you say cones, do you mean what's down there now, you'll just have more? Or you mean like
well,
orange cones?
orange cones, basically, which would be taken up when it's not
Okay.
busy. What we'd like to do is run those when it's really busy all the way up to the Danfords entrance, so that the ferry turning lane is
Yeah.
completely encased.
Okay. And
With
that
them.
would then go past Mariners Way.
Absolutely,
So
but
I like that idea only because some people go into, if I'm understanding, Mariners Way is how you get into that parking lot that's by Fifth Season, in between Fifth Season and the Echoland building.
But also, and I think it was Steve
'Cause I-
Gallagher's comment,
Yeah.
that people coming out of Mariners Way, if they want to make
They-
a left-hand turn.
Yes, but then what I noticed is people that are trying to get on the ferry are making that left-hand turn, and then they cut across all the traffic, no one lets them in, and then it just causes a worse traffic. I'm not opposed to making that a no left turn. I mean, because to me, those cones would be in between the
through lane, the
dedicated
through lane and
turn
the turning
right
lane.
into the ferry and then the straight across. So people could still turn left to get to the blinking light from Mariners Way.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's, yeah, well, understand that when you're adding 2.5 feet of width to the entire roadway, that we'll be able to restripe all of the traffic lanes.
So they would be able to make a left-hand out
Yes,
of Mariners Way?
yes,
To go to the blinking light, but not to get into the
Correct.
ferry.
correct.
There would only be cones stopping them from
That's,
going straight
yeah,
across,
and
right?
somebody's gonna run over them, there's no question, but,
Well,
If they're determined, they'll run it.
Yeah. I had a person do a 3-point K turn to get from the eastbound lane to get into the ferry.
Oh, they
the
do
other
it
day,
all
and that's
the
all the
time. All the time.
and it's a GPS, and they're listening to their GPS. Their focus is on the roadway and not on the signs that say, no left turn,
But
no
I gotta,
U-turn.
I gotta tell you, Fred, many years ago, I used to have Port Jeff Army Navy,
Mhm.
and I had a person come in and say, how do you get to the ferry? And they told me they were on West Broadway, and they saw the sign that said ferry go on to Main Street, but didn't see the sign that says take the left hand onto East Main Street to do a turnaround. He ended
Yeah.
up by the railroad tracks.
Yep,
So I think better signage would help in that incident.
definitely. That
Yeah.
was going to be my next comment. Like, to me, the first solution is to get people not to go through the blinking light if they're heading east. There is a sign that says ferry, turn right,
Yeah, and they
but then there, you
Totally
can't
missed the
see
left
another.
hand, yeah.
When you're on heading south on Main Street, then people can't see a sign that says turn left
Turn left.
onto
Right,
East Main. Yeah.
onto
Right.
East Main.
either that or come up with an agreement with Danfords that people can turn left into Danfords and come around.
Oh, that,
I don't
Well,
know,
look,
I'm just
look,
saying.
I think people are going to do that anyway, and it is a
Yeah.
Port Jeff parking lot back there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know
So-
if we want that to be the sign, like, just, I'm
No,
up
that
for
was-
any
Question, well,
solution.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding this whole thing. Do we have something that shows existing conditions? bring up an area.
Than a photo.
I mean, there's no, but it's not on the plans.
And Fred, you're only talking about cones between, just
I'm
between the
talking
right lane, just
The-
between,
the
just
turn
one
lane
row.
into the ferry.
Just one row of cones,
One
right?
row.
One row, right.
Going back as far as the Danfords entrance.
So you'd be able to make a left turn out of Mariners, you wouldn't have any
No,
cones in the
but
way.
what I'm trying to figure out is how do we solve the problem from people that are heading east through the, Light,
they're
the
coming
blinking
to the-
light.
They're coming to the
Yeah.
freeway.
Yeah,
They have to make a right turning south
right,
onto Main, and then what we need is better, as they're going south that one block, you need to have a left, sign that has a left arrow as you come to that crosswalk, just past the bank where the pizza shop
I know there
is.
was one, and apparently it's gone. Is that what you're?
Not sure, but or
Okay.
maybe on both
Or
sides.
not
Or not visible?
visible,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
people
we'll take a look at
understand
that.
from-
So moving
But-
north is the left turn sign on Arden, or is the left turn sign on East Main Street?
It's,
It's on
That's
East Main
East
Street
Main.
right
East.
On
now.
the corner?
Yeah, but Arden would be
We can
better,
look at that.
yeah,
Think it'd be better at Arden?
yes.
and then you probably need
But-
another one at
Review.
Arden and East Main.
Physically, the
To turn left.
construction,
Yeah.
I can't see any difference between the demolition plan and the construction plan.
Well,
Could you-
2.5 feet are being taken off
Of the
the
sidewalk.
sidewalk.
on the north side.
on the north side, right. We looked at the south side, but there are too many telephone poles to move that would make that.
Is there any way taking the 2.5 feet on the south edge of the north sidewalk, is there any way to add any space on the north edge of the north sidewalk to reclaim some sidewalk back?
You'd have to, if that's Mary Bales Park, you're gonna have to, because it's parkland, you'd have to alienate it. That takes a number of years, at
I
best,
got
so
it,
that could
yeah.
be problematic.
So if we're looking at this right, on that hashed sidewalk where the bottom line is and the line through the middle, that's being removed.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
How is that
And it-
different from the map, from the diagram on top? Just explain that to me.
Well,
You
one-
have two diagrams, I'm just wondering the difference between the two.
Well, you've got to put back all of the drainage, and there's some, like gas meter pits, there are things like that. But basically, 2.5 feet is what's coming off of the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
they're the exact same drawing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But to understand correctly, I think we understand, if I may,
Gonna have to yell.
this section is being removed.
Correct.
So is there any way to add anything on this northern edge, any way, shape, or form, to widen the sidewalk for a continued robust pedestrian experience?
On our property, I would say yes, I'd be happy to do that, but you're correct about alienation of parkland, which takes an act of the New York State
Well,
Legislature, because I'm
but-
going through it right now.
But that Parklands already has tables and chairs from Danfords on it. So perhaps that Parkland's already been,
Alienated,
Yeah.
yes.
No, it's a passive use. You can do that on the parkland.
for a private,
Construction,
okay.
alienation, well, actually, in order to construct, you might have to alienate.
Yeah, you would.
But
Okay.
even if you went through an alienation, is that possible, and would you be willing to commit if we could gain some of the sidewalk back, or at least through part of what's being removed?
If I get through this alienation problem I have right now, I would consider it. But let's see how difficult this is before I commit to another one.
For the record, we do not have an application in planning. This is all
Mhm.
pre-project.
Correct.
And it would have to be the village, I would assume, that would actually apply for the alienation.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
but, if you were willing to do it, then obviously the village would look to you for the mapping and the rest of it.
Right, right.
And one other question on, you're proposing 2.5 feet removal, is that the minimum you need to make this plan work with the new turning lanes? If we only gave you a foot or foot and a half, that wouldn't suffice.
That is the maximum that would allow us to still comply with ADA.
So if we asked you, well, we don't want to give up 2.5, we can only give up 2, we want to keep 6 inches.
I'd be happy to look at that, but I think the goal is to make the roadway as wide as possible so I can have clearly delineated new striping and bollards and cones.
But could you provide, do you have any plans showing the width of the roadway where you need that 2.5 feet, or could you accommodate it with less?
I don't think we can do it with less, but if you want me to look at it, I'd be happy to do so.
It's up to the board. That's the board.
I mean, I would ask you, if I may, unless I use this, sorry. If I may, I would suggest just running it by your engineer, just to get the width of the road and the actual lane widths that would be provided by a 2.5 taking or less.
Less.
Just to see. So this way you can at least say, okay, we're providing 10 feet lanes or 12-foot lanes, or, you know, some combination thereof.
I will do that.
Okay.
Yep, I can do that.
Not to get too far into what you plan on doing in the future, because I know you came in just to talk about this. I guess the reason we have a backup on that right turn lane is because the cars are backed up from the ticket booth, right? Or you're showing.
Check-in- the
you already-
check-in booth.
Check-in booth, because you already have your ticket, you're just showing
Well,
your ticket.
hopefully they
right?
do, yes.
Yeah, right. Is there any way you can move that and get that
I can't
row
move it.
off the street?
I can't move it further because now I'm interfering with the traffic coming off the boat.
Yeah, and you at least have control. of
Yeah,
where
I
people
would
go.
love to
Yeah.
move it, but I just can't do it and keep the traffic flow going. Now, the longer term plan,
Mm-hmm.
you know that building that we're currently in is coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long term,
Mm-hmm.
probably a year out at least. That will allow us to open up the use of the west slip much more frequently than we do. It'll be much
Ah.
more effective.
Okay.
So,
What's a slip? What, I don't know
well,
what that means.
I have two ferry slips.
Oh, okay.
East and
You're-
west.
Of
East
the
and
water.
west.
I thought
Right.
you were telling the drive, okay. Got
Okay,
it.
so the western one, we don't use that often unless there's a problem with the eastern one or some issue. We would like to make that the primary ramp because exiting traffic will not have to compete with incoming
Entering.
traffic.
Oh.
So that's the long-term goal,
Okay.
to
Yeah.
Understand
really pick this up.
This vessel is currently docked in the western slip.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So you do use the western slip.
Oh, we do use it, yeah, but it's not ideal. Tractor trailers they have to be really, really good to use that slip. So a straight off also would put vehicles down the exit road, where right now, they're crossing incoming traffic.
So is that where the new ferry's gonna be? I mean, are you adding like a whole nother ferry?
We have a fourth ferry, yeah, as a matter
So
of
you'll
fact, it
have
went in the
more-
water Friday.
Yeah, I saw.
It went in the water Friday, so doesn't mean it's near completion, but it should be ready by October, November.
So it's not replacing a ferry, it's adding.
We cannot provide year-round 3-boat service on a weekend unless we have 4 boats.
Okay,
Because if one's in the shipyard, I'm down to 2.
okay.
And last year, we were down to 2 for almost, I understand, Jake, 6 months? 6 months, we only had two vessel service. So
Wow.
we're adding this to make sure we can have 3 vessels on the weekend.
How many berth slips do you have in Bridgeport?
I have only 1 right now, but I'm building a second one.
So you
It'll
have
be
4
ready.
slips for 4 berths.
Correct.
What would you do, and this really isn't purview to this, but if one of the vessels broke down in a slip and was could not be moved, you only have 1 slip, but three working vessels, it would be a
Our
challenge.
parent company has tugs.
Oh, tug.
We'll get it out.
Okay.
We'll get it out.
And you think it'll be about a year before,
That's
I mean,
just a
estimate?
guess because this building across the street needs to be completed.
Mm-hmm.
We need to complete the renovations in the old Ekelin building as well.
Right.
So that has to be accomplished before we move out of where we are.
Can you
Okay.
explain a little bit what is going in across the street in the Ekelin building?
In the Ekelin building, our call center is going in there. Our port captain staff marine personnel, et cetera. And I'm keeping one tenant, the Pilates lady who's there, she's staying. And then the rest of it is actually going to be an exercise room, lounge for anybody in the company. So
So you own the building now?
we own it.
Okay, so when you move all those personnel over here, or do you plan to still use that in some capacity?
What is in my mind, and I haven't fully formed this yet, is that we are going to put a much smaller building there for ticketing, waiting area, public restrooms.
Where the Evelyn is now?
No, where our current building is.
So you're gonna have 3 locations.
We'll have 3 buildings servicing the ferry.
Where
Yes.
will most of the customers be going?
They'll be going to right where they are today.
Okay,
It'll be a much smaller footprint, though.
understood.
Yep.
And then the building you're building now, who will be there?
I will be there.
Yep.
Engineering will be there. HR will be there. Accounting will be there.
And
And we are talking to Suffolk County PD to give them an office in the building. We have that situation in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where Bridgeport Marine cops are in
And
the
then
building.
in
We want the same thing. here.
Ekelin, it would be other ferry employees?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because we're concerned about people going from the ferry crossing the street.
I don't ever want to have that happen for ticketing purposes. I mean, obviously, you might have business of some kind other than ticketing, but the primary interaction is ticketing, and that will continue to be done where it is today.
And the building you're building now, that cannot accommodate all of your needs. This is why you need Ekelin as well?
We thought we could put everybody in that building, and then COVID happened, and we realized that was a really bad idea to put so many people in the one building, and that's why we went after Ekelin, so that we could split the personnel, try to keep everybody healthy and
Where do you plan on having the Ekelin employees park?
well, we own parking spots too.
It's on the side there, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the new building
Yes.
that is going to replace the existing one by the water, is it going to be 1 story?
Not determined yet. I want to keep it as low as possible. I'm going to have to make sure I've got the proper height because of sea rise. But, you know, I would try to keep it as reasonable as possible. Now, my challenge, so you understand, is getting people on and off the vessel in the west slip. Right now, they come off the bow. I can't have the interaction between vehicles and passengers. It's just not right. So, going forward, I have to figure out some way to get them off the stern of the boat.
I thought, well, last time I took the ferry, I was a passenger, I went on and off from the stern.
Yeah, but that was on the east slip. It's the west slip I have a problem. I don't have a way to get people on and off currently. So that is a problem that needs to be solved, and one we'll be coming to talk to you about at length, I'm sure.
Would that be enlarging the slip, perhaps?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
I just got to say that many years ago when that building was built, my mother was horrified that the view was blocked from the height.
I will tell you that when that building comes down, you will have a view straight down Main Street that you haven't had since it was built.
There you go.
And that is,
When
and
the ferries aren't in, because when the ferries are in,
Well,
they're
what-
actually
it-
taller than the building.
well, you've got
Depending
one
on the
ferry in that might block it, but still, a boat's better to look at than that building. So,
Also, just on the personal side, my friend who lives in Norwalk and I have a difficult time with your website because you can't plan further than a certain short amount of time.
that's not the website, that's me. I don't put up my schedule until I know what my schedule's gonna be.
That's what I
So,
thought
blame,
was the
blame it on
reason.
me, it's not the website.
That's what I thought was the reason.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it can be frustrating.
I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We put it up as far in advance as we can, but there are all kinds of things that go into creating the schedule, and I apologize, but,
Well, we appreciate that, thank you.
okay.
So for the sidewalks, though, you'll let us know what the maximum or minimum amount of sidewalk you could take to keep
Absolutely.
your I guess, through lane and right turn lane. And if you need 2.5 feet, or perhaps you could do it so we could have, instead of a 5.5 foot sidewalk, maybe a full 6 foot wide sidewalk.
We will look at it and see if we can accomplish that.
And just to go over what you said, that ticket booth eventually is going to move when the west slip is open? I'm sorry, not the
much-
ticket booth, but the, what do you call it, the check-in booth?
The check-in probably can't move because I'm still going to be using the e-slip at some point. In other words, a captain's going to tell me it's too dangerous to be set down on the Brookhaven dock. I need to use the e-slip. So I still am going to have an active use of that slip.
Well, with 4 vessels, you'll have 2 in Bridgeport and 2 here.
Correct.
They'll, yeah, jogging back and forth, you're gonna have to use the west as much as the east.
Well,
Right, we're
I-
talking about moving the booth, so the booth is where you first come in,
Right.
no matter what.
I still need to have an active e-slip. I can't do away with it.
Yes,
So-
absolutely.
So I can't move that booth, unfortunately. I would love to.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a way you could work that out with the space you have on the dock in the future, because that's okay for a temporary condition, because you've got your traffic backing up on a public road. But for, if that's going to stay there, I think that's, maybe a subject for another meeting, but,
Sure.
that's a problem.
One time, someone talked about moving that check-in booth next to Danford's rather than sitting out in the lot. I thought that was a subject years ago.
I don't recall that.
Yeah.
I don't recall that.
I think we're about done. Okay, any other questions? Because we need to get to the public hearing, but maybe a short public hearing, so if anybody has anything more for Fred, we can have him stick around, but otherwise,
Thank you.
we're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
All
for
right.
having me,
Thanks.
and always happy to come in. We're going to have lots to talk about through the years, I can assure you.
Okay.
Careful, watch it.
We gotta go.
Would you like me to sit?
I think
Over there?
we're gonna move, we have public hearing, so we're gonna go up behind us in the dais. Give us a couple minutes.
Thank you. I'm not even gonna use the laptop, I'm having problems with it anyway. I don't see why this guy they could put that booth out on the dock, near the dock. There's gotta be a way. I mean, with technology, there's gotta be a way. Well, maybe like when you have insanely busy days, you could do something, with a hand check-in. But I don't think it needs to be there permanently.
It'll be interesting to see when they get the building down, how they reconfigure that site.
Should be unload at West Dock. Right.
Okay, this is the public hearing for 224 East Main Street, the conditional use permit and site development plan. Cindy, if you can just read in the particulars of this one, and then we get started.
224 East Main Street, conditional use permit and site development plan. Application number 0650-23. Suffolk County tax map number is District 206, Section 12, Block 3, Lot 13. Zoning is C1 Commercial. Property owner, Aisling Inc., care of Leo Harrington. Applicant, Aisling Inc., care of Leo Harrington. Contact is Woodhull Expediting LLC, care of Amy DeVito. Description, the Performing Arts Studio is currently operating on the second floor without a proper CO. A conditional use permit from the planning board pursuant to Village Code, Section 250-18B11 is required. Action tonight is a public hearing.
Thank you, Cindy. So what we'll do is we'll hear from the applicant first, after the applicant gets sworn in. And then staff will have some comments. We'll see if we're going to take public comment immediately thereafter, but let's get to that point first. If anyone is here, is that anyone here on this project to possibly speak? Possibly. Okay. If you don't mind, if you determine that you got a sign-in sheet. Okay. Thank you. So we will take some public comment anyway, depending on how far we get. But when you come up for public comment, you'll get sworn in by the stenographer. So why don't we get started? First, name and address, and you'll get sworn in.
Good afternoon, Mr. Is this working? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Amy DeVito, Woodhull Expediting, with offices at 800 Veterans Memorial Highway, Hauppauge, New York. I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you want to give some background on the project, just general
Sure.
information. Have you seen the staff report?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
All right, so
I've
talk about that.
seen
too.
it and I've read it.
Okay.
So just to give some background, this property was acquired by Leo Harrington, Ainsling Inc., back in the early 1990s via auction from a liquidation of assets from the prior owner. At the time, the Performing Arts Studio was not there. It was actually occupied by the Port Jeff Record and a real estate office. So it was at one time 2 units that fronted on East Main Street. In 1997, the Performing Arts Studio took possession and took both units, both the old real estate office and the Port Jeff Record office. And they utilized the entire, what I would call first floor from the East Main Street elevation. What brought us here today was there was a office in the lower level in Traders Cove. It was actually a small law office. A smoke shop had come in, I guess, to the building department. I was not involved in that, but they did an administrative change of use for office to retail. So they've been operating in that space for some time now, about a year. As part of the conditions to that administrative change of use, one of the conditions was for the Performing Arts Studio to be legalized by way of a special permit and, of course, subsequent permits from the building department for interior alterations. So with that said, I do have Terry Morrissey and Michael Livering here. They are the folks behind me that filled out the speaker card. So if the board does have any questions about operation of what the Performing Arts Studio does, they'd be happy to come up and speak. I could just kind of give you a very abridged version of what they do, which is basically classes and workshops for performing arts, voice lessons, acting classes, things of that nature. They've been in that unit, like I said, since 1997. It's been a fixture in the community for a long time, and I believe has helped a lot of people, both young and old, with training and furthering their, careers in the performing arts. As far as the CO, there are 3 one-bedroom apartments on the second floor. Those still exist today. As I said, in the lower level, the change of use was consummated via administrative change of use for the retail to office to retail. I know that, so we submitted a survey, not an actual full site plan. I'm not sure how that exactly came to be, because it was something that Mr. Sanzano was originally working on. I stepped into this application a little bit after submission. But I do know, just by talking to the owner, that they do have garbage pails from Maggio Carting, where that is where the apartments get rid of their refuse. So that's picked up on the normal downtown schedule. As far as the performing arts studio and the smoke shop, I believe, and we could clarify this with the proprietors, that any small amount of garbage that they do produce gets, taken off premise with them. I don't know that I have really anything further to add other than opening up this for questions from the board.
Okay, before we do that, Deirdre, if you just want to summarize what's in that memo in terms of what's needed?
Yeah, so the application is pretty bare right now. We tried looking at any historical files and just couldn't find a lot. Like Ms. DeVito said, there's apartments in the building, there's the performing arts studio, there's all the retail in the other side. There's no business registrations for any of it except the new smoke shop. There's no apartment licenses. There's just no filing for any of the operations that are happening right now. Previously, the last thing that was on a CO is 2 retail stores in the same space that the Performing Arts Center is in right now.
Mm-hmm.
I assume there must have been some interior renovations that have happened from 2 separate stores to now be one collaborative space, especially now that they also have classes there, and theoretically they would have more people in the space than just regular foot traffic, depending on the time of year. We just would like any more information about that, any changes that have happened, and for them to file and get everything kind of up to date.
Okay, before we go to any questions from the board, Amy, you're okay with providing that information?
Yeah, of
Obtaining.
course. So what I, assume will be the next logical step in this would be the interior alterations permit with the building department. We would have to supply them with a floor plan of, at the very least, the performing arts studio, the first floor, which we are, more than happy to supply the building and planning department with. If the board would like to see that prior to, we could certainly get started on that now.
Okay. All right. Any board questions?
Did you say you had information on the smoke shop downstairs, or you don't?
The smoke shop was done through a separate building permit. So there is information, I believe, about that change of use and all of that went into it.
Thank you.
So my question is, well, one, the building's lovely. I've been a resident for a long time. I haven't noticed any refuse outside. I haven't noticed any, when it's snowing or raining, any issues. Didn't know there were apartments up there. So aside from all of that it's a very functional working building. Had this come before us the way it probably, way back when, if somebody had come and said, hey, I would like to have a change of use, what would they have had to do? Like, what do they need to do actually to make it a formal application, to cross all the T's, dot all the I's,
Right.
if I'm making sense?
Well, they would have had to do what they're doing now,
Okay.
file for a conditional use permit, but we would have needed also building permits for any interior changes.
Including the apartments upstairs, or
The
are we
apartments-
talking about just?
Just the main floor with the performing arts for those changes. I don't believe there's any changes to the apartments. The
Okay.
last apartment license that was cleared by our fire marshals was only for last year though, so they haven't filed for this year. That's also another thing we need them to file for.
Okay.
Ms. Zimmerman, just to answer your question, there's been no changes to the apartments.
Okay.
Not under my, client's ownership. So the CEU, as far as we know, still covers the apartments just as they are. They
Great.
are all still 1-bedroom apartments, and there is no sign of alteration in them.
Right.
I will speak to Mr. Harrington about filing for the apartment licenses right away, or I'll take care of that for him, but we'll discuss it. And Ms. Sabatino, to answer your question, there was an approved administrative change of use for the change of use from office to retail for the smoke shop, but as part of their conditions, we had to legalize the performing arts studio, which brings us here today.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
I guess what my question is, do we need a whole detailed set of site plan drawings with drainage and lighting, and do we need all of that, or?
I think the main thing that we just need to know at this point because we also don't know what that could entail, what has changed. It could have been
Right.
something that was there the whole entire time, and
Right.
that's what it is. But there have been interior changes, and I think that's the biggest worry, is the
Okay.
interior changes in the
That's-
public assembly. We don't know how that
Right.
changes the use and how it affects the site and anything like that. The
Yeah,
number of
'cause obviously
bathrooms
it's
or any of
working.
that.
Mhm.
It is,
Yeah,
yeah, but we just
so-
wanna know what's in the space, cause obviously also with the capacity for any water usage in 2 retail stores might be different than something that has summer camps that come with like lots of little kids or just
Okay.
adults even. Just those changes, we just wanna make sure would be on par for what is allowed in the space.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding, and Deirdre, this is directed to you, so, my next steps would be to have plans done for the first floor and also consult with DPW, since we are on sewers down there, to make sure that the use as far as flow and whatever their criteria is permitted under the, I guess, current sewer connection. Yeah, and there's no food or anything in that building, so, I think that would be it. So those would be my next steps, correct?
Correct, those
Okay.
are the 2 main things
All
that
right,
we
perfect.
just wanna check out now.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that's Suffolk County DPW, right?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Suffolk County DPW.
Okay, so what we'll most likely do is adjourn the hearing to next month, if that's enough time, Amy, do you think?
Yeah, I
To
think so.
Get things together, at least we'll have some drawings to look at.
Yes.
So that's probably what we'll do at this point. In the meantime, if there is anyone here who is going to speak other than the people that you brought down from the studio, because we're okay with the operation of the studio and the functions that it serves. If there's anybody else who wants to speak or make a comment, now's the time to do it. Just put your hand up, we'll bring you up. Okay, seeing no one. Can I get a motion to adjourn the hearing to the next meeting date, which is June 13th?
I'll motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, back down. No, we're going back down. You only asked me that because I had us moving last time, and there was something else, right? Yeah. Yeah. We should move this further away, too. Oh, we can't because of the mics, the cords. Okay, next item on the work session agenda is Port Jefferson Commons. So I would say representatives from Port Jefferson Commons, come on up, take a seat here. We have a couple of seats. And you can actually.
sorry, hang on.
This is.
Oh, okay, that's easier, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Mic's on, okay. Primarily, the discussion tonight is go over the draft resolution for approval. We closed the hearing. When was that, last meeting or the meeting before? I lost track. Last meeting, we closed the hearing. We had a resolution prepared, but we have added to it, made some changes and additions. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to go through it, but between the two, I think there were two changes. Anybody have a handle on that? From the last draft resolution from April that we had? I thought there were.
Saw one also.
I
There
thought
was
there were.
like there's really just one change, but there's a few little edits that I just wanted to make,
Right.
just
It was two edits that I saw.
changing some
I-
wording.
I
Okay.
noticed there were asterisks in a few
Asterisks.
places. I wasn't sure if it was typos or if there, but I also was wondering if the board would be willing to add to the whereas that's on page, let's see, 2. The third whereas down with all the bullet points. Where it says 3 stories, where 3 stories plus a bonus 4th story maximum are permitted. That's also where I think an asterisk is at the end. However, I would like noted somewhere in there, if the board is okay with it, that it's 3 stories because the zoning board said it was 3 stories.
Okay, I could.
So
based
say
on-
3 stories per zoning board decision, where 3 stories plus a bonus 4th story. And then there's a few, at the bottom of that, I don't know if it's because I edited, but there's an and kind of hanging around. Okay. At the bottom of that paragraph.
Well, I think it's because you said whereas and.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that in the other, because
They all
it's
have
down, with a, but it also, there's those 2 dots, like it has that weird dot. Well, no, like this.
Oh, the
Semicolon.
semicolon before?
Semicolons.
I think it's my version, somehow there's these
Oh.
weird bullets that got added in. I think it's a bullet.
They always have
that got-
semicolons before the ands.
My version, because I added an edit,
Uh,
it made the and a whole nother bullet point. So I didn't know if it was mine or.
Okay. Any other other comments? Before we go into the conditions, maybe, I don't know if everybody's looked at the conditions in detail.
I was wondering about the wording, in regards to, I thought I underlined it. Number 20, I guess, let's see. My thing got so much, where it's bullet, the numbers, so keep going.
The
Okay.
conditions.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering about the wording, sorry, number 20, there's a weird saying, it says, prior to issuance of a CO, the applicant in the village of Port Jefferson shall draft an easement agreement for a planned grease trap to be within under the,
I could change that. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, under, not with.
yeah. And then, I'm trying to find it, I apologize, but there was wording in here about fixing the parking, and I can't find it.
That was one of the edits where I took out the verbiage for specifically saying they needed a pileup.
Okay,
Just
that's what I'm
because-
asking.
Yeah, just because we're not sure, technically they could also go to the ZBA for that. So we're giving them that out, that if they really wanted to, they could go back to the ZBA and also get a relief that way, not forcing them to do the PILOP. That's why that was taken out, and just kind of said
Okay.
that they need to address the deficiency.
I thought once you were short spaces, you had to go to the Board of Trustees. It wasn't a variance issue.
According to the code, it says you shall go before the Board of Trustees. So it's not necessarily restricting it to just the Board of Trustees. It's still.
So they're actually looking to go back to the zoning board?
No,
and
I
get-
don't believe so, but
Okay.
technically, because it's still part of code, ZBA can vary that part of code. So if they go to the Board of Trustees, let's say they only want to give let them pay for 10 parking spaces, they need 13, they can then go to ZBA and get the 3 varied. So it just leaves a little bit of wiggle room for them to
Okay,
somehow
are we
deal with
in the
that as well.
future for all of our future applications, is this how we're going to word it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the village attorney has given us an interpretation by the Board of Trustees on PILOP, and it's their interpretation that the applicant has to exhaust, or should exhaust, any administrative remedies that are available to them. And then, as staff has indicated, presuming that they get some of their parking waived, they would need to go to the Board of Trustees for their entire load of deficient parking.
Okay,
So
so
the Board
it
of
used,
Trustees is requesting that the planning board permit the applicant to do other administrative remedies.
so, because in the past, we could waive, part of our purview used to be, we could waive parking.
We-
Then they said, no, you cannot do that anymore. But now they're going back and they're saying it's not planning board, it's zoning board who's
That
going
is-
to be able to waive parking.
That is correct.
Okay, just so I'm clear, so next year I'm gonna not remember. You can tell
It'll
me.
change by next year.
Next year or next
Next
week?
meeting.
So we need
Yeah.
to get a condition for that, Andy?
Sorry?
We need to get a condition for that in there, or no?
No,
No.
Well,
don't need
it's-
a condition.
It was because the wording was, there was no wording about PILOP, it was, and I apologize, I thought I
It's number
underlined.
2, I think, in the conditions, I believe.
Oh, yeah, shall resolve proposed parking deficiencies.
Oh,
But
Oh, okay.
thank you for clarifying, that's what I.
Is the planning board going to suggest, even though they don't have to go to the trustees first, is planning board going to suggest an amount per parking space?
So with regard to the amount of parking, as we know, the Board of Trustees sets that amount. If they ask for input, which we did for a previous application, staff can assist the planning board, of putting together a recommendation on the cost for the PILOT. If the planning board has a specific reason, you could certainly volunteer a suggestion to the Board of Trustees. But the drill would be applicant goes, satisfies any deficiencies they may have, assuming there's a leftover deficiency, they would go to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees sets the amount for the PILOT. They can ask for advice, but they don't have to. And they have no standards, by the way, or criteria, since they're a legislative body, on what they should measure an application against for the cost of the PILOT.
any others? Okay, I'd like to add one. In the past on this project, you've heard me talk about the comprehensive plan, which talks about changing the direction of traffic flow on Perry Street and installing a traffic signal at Main and Perry, being that traffic would be traveling westbound and a lot of vehicles would want to make left turns. The feeling during the comp plan was that this would alleviate some of the left turns that occur on North Country Road turning left onto Main Street, backups that occur particularly in the afternoon when the hospital's shifts get out, would split or take some of the left turners and move them down to Perry, and the signals would be coordinated. Being that this project generates not a tremendous amount of traffic, and we've got to develop or potential development to the north from Perry North all the way to North Country as part of the comprehensive plan or noted in the comprehensive plan, I'd like to add a condition with this language. So if determined in the future by the village and/or the New York State Department of Transportation, which has jurisdiction over traffic on Main Street. The applicant shall implement traffic improvements, for example, signs and other traffic control measures along Perry Street. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I will, right after the meeting.
So you're only suggesting traffic signage and not a reconstruction of the, where we had talked years ago about aligning Perry Street with Linden, and that is not in this.
Yeah, I think we had discounted that because of the buildings and, probably wasn't going to happen. It may be mentioned in the comp plan, but at least signalizing that intersection so you can make a left turn. That would also give the pedestrians an opportunity who cross there on the crosswalk. We give them an opportunity to push a button and get a walk signal instead of trying to vie their way through traffic.
Legally, how long can we hold someone on the hook?
That's my question.
So, can you read it one more time?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Well, what I have so far is that if determined in the future by the village and/or the New York State Department of Transportation, the applicant shall implement traffic improvements, for example, signs or other traffic control measures along Perry Street.
You might consider putting them, having them pay into a fund that can be held, because a signalized intersection may not occur for many years.
Yeah, that was the initial thought, to have a bond posted, but we're not really sure what, they would not be totally responsible for a traffic signal. And if you took the traffic generation that they're responsible for and use that as a percentage over the future development to the north, it wouldn't be 50-50.
No.
It would be a lot less because there's 53 apartments, is it? And they generate probably about less than 30 trips an hour, which is one every 2 minutes. A vehicular trip, one every 2 minutes, which in a peak hour is almost negligible.
Who would be
So-
responsible to maintain such a signal? Would it be state DOT?
I don't know if you're,
I'm sorry.
you're
And who would be responsible to install and maintain such a signal?
that maintenance goes over to DOT
State
after
DOT.
it's constructed. Yeah, they
So-
inspect it and then assume maintenance of it.
So I 100% agree with the intention. I'm just curious legally what verbiage we need to have in there
Well,
for
I
time.
don't want to speak for legal issues, but I think reading what the chair has proposed, it's a little open-ended because it does say implement traffic improvements, doesn't say what, or other traffic measures. It really doesn't say what. So that invites a discussion between the village and the applicant at the time you want to trigger this condition. So it's a little open-ended because we don't know what we're talking about in terms of traffic improvements or other traffic, if I got it right, other traffic improvements or mitigations.
So how do we address this though? Because they are, even though it's not a lot, they still are generating traffic. Someone's got to put a signal in at some point, hypothetically, or not, but.
Isn't the time now?
Yeah.
I think it's hard to do this, by the way, open-ended in the future.
No,
Yeah.
we should, no, that's a good comment.
But
We
I
should put a
agree with
timeframe.
having something.
Well, can we make it, prior to satisfaction of all the conditions of approval?
You could definitely push it down the road.
Which isn't, well, depends. That's up to the applicant to meet all the conditions and.
Sorry, by the way, for the record, Phil Butler with Forcelli Deegan Toronto for the applicant. Is the proposal that this would be a condition of the approval that a traffic light now be installed before the CO? Okay. So, conceptually, I think the idea of sharing and an obligation to contribute to traffic improvements is a good idea. But if there's no current proposal for what is going to be done or when, there's really no meaningful way for Conifer to commit to anything because we don't know what it's going to cost, when it's going to be done. So, that's just my 2 cents. I'm not necessarily objecting to the condition, but I just don't see practically how that would execute when the project's going to be done you know, within 2 years, and the improvements may not happen ever.
Question, the light, the signal that was placed to the north down at the end of the hill, right in front of the CVS parking lot, that's fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take to get that designed, constructed, and implemented?
That was relatively quick because the village collected some traffic volume data, submitted it to DOT. DOT approved the signal, and they designed it under their requirements contract, where they design a certain number of signals every year for installation. So relatively quick, a couple of years, 2.5 years maybe. I mean, that's fast.
Could we, as part of this, maybe we can ask the applicant to collect background data traffic now that we could use for such design that we could ask DOT to look at later.
But I think that, sorry to interrupt you, but I think the DOT is going to rely on its own data. They're not going to take a study prepared by an applicant along a state road. I mean, if they're going to change anything on that road, they're going to do probably a comprehensive analysis of, you know, in current data. So if we provide something today, again, it goes back to the question of when is everything going to happen? Is that data still going to be good by the time that the state finally decides to do anything?
State
you know,
DOT, oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, did DOT weigh in on this application?
I don't think have we ever gotten DOT comments on this? I think, you know, right, and I don't think they made any comments because typically if there's no driveway access or roadway impacting the state road, a new driveway or roadway, they won't comment because it's like, we don't, you know.
But they may not have been aware that a signal was being proposed for this location.
Well,
And they might have.
it's a future proposal when it's needed upon all the development on the east side of the roadway. So what we could do is define it as traffic sign improvements, at least.
And you could do that
There's
prior to the issuance of the last CO, or, you know.
Yeah.
something
Well,
like that.
Limited to
Yes.
traffic sign improvements.
So just for the record, Attorney Jim Burke is here for the
Mhm.
board. We had a quick discussion. I discussed a little bit with staff. It typically, at least the last Conifer project, took about a year from the time you conditionally approved it to the time the chair signed the map. So you might want to put something a little vague that says prior to the signing of the map,
Okay.
the applicant shall come
Yeah,
and
that's-
discuss these improvements. So that gives the applicant about a year, it gives the village about a year to get a little bit down the road on whether or not the village is invested in this reversal of the traffic.
Also, just to note through my professional experience, state DOT often will accept traffic data for reports up to 3 years old.
Correct.
That matters.
Never mind, no.
So let me just reread this. As I'm writing. So I'll read this again before we take a vote on it. Oh, wait till the discussion. I'm going to read the condition, the revised condition.
Okay.
Okay. If determined prior to the signing of the, what kind of map should we call that?
This is a site plan, right? It's conditional approval site plan map. So,
Prior to the signing of the conditional approval / site plan map. So it's if determined prior to the signing of the conditional approval / site plan map by, okay. The applicant shall implement installation of traffic sign improvements along Perry Street but I would want to say.
I think you want to have a discussion on whether you want to implement that, because a year from now, we theoretically will know whether or not the village is invested in reversing Perry Street or not.
Right.
So you want to have a discussion with the applicant at that time, depending on which way the trustees have evolved.
Right, so I wanted to get in there if approved by the village and or DOT.
You mean at the end of your discussion, if the concept is approved,
Well-
reversing the direction?
All right.
And so I think you want to have a conversation on the feasibility of reversing the traffic on Perry Street, and this is why you want Jim, and again, feasibility, I would change the word, of cost sharing traffic improvements, or as you pointed out, signage or delay, something like that. I think you want to have a discussion before you sign the map. And if that discussion leads to the applicant providing signage or fees into a light, then you would make that agreement and amend the approval and sign the map.
Okay.
Does that sound doable?
Use the term like as required, the applicant would agree to some conditions.
Can we put in if warranted?
Yeah.
If warranted at the time?
If warranted as required by the board. Prior to final approval of the map.
All right, I think we've got the key idea here.
Yeah.
The actual language may have to follow.
Just so it gets on the record, I think that we can work on the language, circulate it with the board.
Yes.
And, because I think conceptually you have it down,
Yes,
you can approve
exactly,
it,
right.
and we'll work with the applicant and the
Right.
board, and we'll get that language down.
Right.
The
That's what
concept
I-
being
yeah.
that in the future, we're going to talk about improvements to Perry Street
Right.
and traffic control devices.
Okay.
You don't want it too big, but you don't also want to put it on the one applicant,
So-
to handle all the traffic improvements that might, be appropriate for the area in a year from now. We don't, as I said, we're not sure exactly
So
what
can-
we're doing with Perry Street at this point.
Right, I agree with that.
So you want us to approve a resolution, but not have the wording? I wonder if we can just work on, maybe we come back to this, if you can work on language for what we're looking for, and then we can always come back to it.
Well, I would
know.
suggest that you could also leave it to subject to approval as formed by your village attorney, and can circulate the language to this board before it's
Okay.
finalized. That way we don't have to hold up.
Yeah, I think we have an
Okay.
agreement and concept of what it's going to say. We
Okay.
can work out the language. I don't know that, and we could email it around for just a final look-see to the board.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's my thought.
So the idea is if the Board of Trustees and the DOT decide prior to the signing of the site plan map that improvements to Perry Street or the intersection need to occur, the applicant will be required to come back to the village and basically enter into discussions about what improvements will be made.
For sure,
Yeah.
for those
And
such
cost sharing.
Yeah,
improvements.
yeah,
That's,
Yeah.
summarize it?
yeah.
Okay.
The applicant's okay with that, then we're good.
Yeah. we can
And
agree.
then-
Certainly
Okay.
have a conversation.
All right.
But ultimately, you're agreeing to paying money down the road
Well,
for a hypothetical improvement.
It could be a very small portion, though.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't agree to pay money that we don't know. It's
Yeah, I agree.
Question.
Okay.
But if you look at Port Jefferson Crossing and the amount of traffic that goes down.
I'm just saying, this is our moment, this is our chance to actually get an applicant to commit to a financial agreement, and we're kicking it down the road to the point where they're going.
I mean, it's not ideal, but it's also, we don't know, really,
Yeah.
at this point, we really don't know what's going to happen in the year from now, so it's hard to predict. If we have the applicant is agreeable to that open-ended language as part of the approval, I think we'll okay.
Okay. The other question I had was, in the bullet points above the conditions, it was mentioned about a parkland fee, but that wasn't part of the conditions. So I'm just curious when and how So, I don't know if it's because I edited this page, but the parkland fee is discussed under resolved that the proposed plan meets the requirements of VPJ code, blah, 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 and then there's bullet points. And it's the 4th bullet point. But it is not a numbered condition. So do we need it as a numbered condition? Before they get their CO, they must pay the
So-
parkland fee?
This was based off the previous Conifer one, and it was not part of the conditions at that point either. It was
Okay.
actually an amendment that came later.
Okay.
So Conifer itself is just not usual, I guess, in its proceedings with this planning board. It just hasn't gone in the normal proceedings that another application would, so that's why things are not exactly the same as you would expect from another application, and that's where the parkland fee is a little bit of a mystery at the moment. We could go off of the previous Conifer one and what that number was, but that's.
No,
what we
no,
didn't want
all I'm
to-
saying is I feel like it needs to be a condition
Right.
of, before you get your CO, you must pay the parkland fee,
That's how I read
Right?
this stuff.
but it wasn't a numbered,
A numbered condition.
it's a bullet, so is that enough, the bullet?
Well, it does say that they will meet the requirements.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's regardless, that's not
okay,
conditional on their approval, they are meeting those requirements, that has been.
but it
something
just doesn't
discussed
have a
with them.
time associated with it, it doesn't have
Well,
a.
the whole application
hey,
has a time associated with it.
Okay.
That's the last condition, I believe, it's the last.
Yes, in terms of.
One of the last conditions say that approval shall terminate in 24 months, so they need to do everything, even past the conditions, they need to meet the requirements as well.
Okay.
Or those are just blanket requirements that they need to meet.
Okay. Did we get that? Right.
You make a point, Laura, that fee may belong in the conditions,
Well, it can't hurt to reiterate it again.
or reiterate.
I apologize. I don't, I
Copy
just,
it.
when it comes to something like money, I think that it needs to be very clearly stated when that money shall be given to the village.
You can repeat the comment in the condition.
Yeah.
Before CO, they must, blah, blah. Is that okay?
Prior to the issue of the CO.
Thank you.
So just to understand from my own peace of mind, we're asking the applicant down the road to pay a potential annual parkland fee. Yep, pay into a potential parking fee for the offset of the 13 spaces, and potentially also pay in the other traffic improvements on Perry Street.
Yes.
They will be also paying an inspection fee and I believe a cut and fill fee as well. There are other fees that are detailed in there.
So I'm just confused a little bit, I'm sorry. On page 5 of 7, the third condition,
5 of 7.
prior to the final stamp site plan approval, the applicant shall pay the parkland fee in the amount determined by the board of trustees.
Oh,
So-
Oh, it's in
thank
there?
you. Thank you. I missed it. My bad.
Yeah.
I think this will go over.
Thank you.
Ah. Okay.
And I edited this, so it got it all, I know, I should never do that, because it's all jumbled. I don't know.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the resolution with the additional with additional condition, the language of which will be finalized shortly, as discussed tonight?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Who's second, I'm sorry?
Robert. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, good. No.
If Perry became one way before it became a light there, all traffic would have to be diverted. Right.
If Perry,
If Perry became, if we altered Perry Street.
and went the other way,
without-
yes,
with-
yes,
without
would have to all go north.
all-
Yeah, without a light, exactly.
It
Right.
used to be two-way.
Yeah.
And I
Have
think
people make a left turn?
you
used to
did
wait.
it.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't all that long ago.
All right, next up is 250 East Main, so have the representatives come up.
I'm sorry, who's this?
250 East Main Street. This is Agrino Holdings.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board.
Hi, you can
From
come up
up
here,
here?
sit here, we, you know, yeah. We'll, it's a little less formal and,
Feel privileged now.
Live.
we don't like people talking down to us, so we get intimidated.
that.
So we have you sit here. Okay, so we discussed this last time, right? We were
Correct.
pretty, and you had ARC comments.
Yes, pretty much everything was addressed, with the exception of the ARC comments.
Right.
The ARC had made certain recommendations with respect to color, parapet, making a continuous facade where we have a gap between the buildings, which we accommodate. We eliminated the shutters. We also addressed the color of the, not only the siding, but also the windows, which are black windows, which will match the building at the corner, which is historic, okay? The only item that we wanted to discuss with the board was the existing signage. We had proposed that we provide the background as suggested, okay? But the existing signs, that would require every tenant to replace their signs. So my client would like to have the tenants maintain their signs and place those on top of the requested background color.
Okay. Deirdre, you have any comment on that, about this, the signs? Maybe he just brought up?
I mean, if there's any changes to the signs, it would go through a sign permit and probably be directed to the architectural review committee like every other sign, so.
Okay.
As it is right now, I didn't believe that the board had any issues with signs or had any comments on that specifically. I think there was more concern about the roof style and the architectural style, so that was more of the focus, I guess. But the resolution does just note that the applicant will address based on the architectural comments as the planning board saw fit. So if there are any changes that you would like to make, that could be included in it as well.
I don't know, anybody have any feeling on
So
that?
you
that
don't want to
change?
go with the picture that this,
Can you look back?
This picture?
You're just gonna bring up an image? Well, for the existing, go, hit that arrow one, so go to the north.
no, what I'm asking is if they're gonna do this.
Yeah. My
That's,
question is, why did the ARC recommend no shutters when the existing building has shutters next to it?
The one to the west is not, the one to the left is not.
Yeah, but the one to the right does.
You see the ARC.
It's the one below, so if you could scroll up, there it is.
so you're,
One either, it's the one that closes the gap.
Well, that was his proposed.
Yeah, that was a comment on the
Yeah.
ARC.
I mean, I think it's lovely. I'm just,
Do they want the gap closed, the ARC,
Yes.
or open?
No, they want it closed. So what we did was we modified our drawing to accommodate that closed rendition. So it's continuous across. So it ties into the building on the right there, which is to the south.
So the question is, I don't think we should be asking the tenants to change their signs to fit what the ARC recommends, because it's just one more expense. And.
I just don't know what the
and
signs
their
look like.
signage right there.
Take a look at the signs quickly?
Yeah, those are existing tenants at the moment.
So they're three-dimensional.
And that's not a
Three-dimensional
donut bar
signs.
anymore.
So the ARC is recommending changes. How do we feel about them keeping their
The-
own signs?
But
Okay.
those signs look like they're part of the building that aren't, they're gonna have to be taken down.
they're
See, that- if you
three-dimensional.
look- They're three-dimensional, basically
Right.
they're individual, okay, so those can be placed on the background, which was requested by the board. So that would
Yeah.
be, you know, you're asking the tenant to now absorb a cost associated with something that has nothing to do with them, it's the building, you know, that we're adding to, okay, on the second floor.
The only problem they're gonna have is, those are black letters and. aren't we
Yeah,
looking for
I
a
think
black
it's something
background?
to be addressed
Yeah,
I
we could-
believe
we
that-
could
Later.
address that with the tenants.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I believe that the signs that are shown here, this is an old street view, this is not
Yeah.
accurate.
Oh,
So
that's
I don't
what we
know what the signs are there currently
Got it.
off the top of my head, and they
Yeah.
could be changed. And it could be something where whatever the signs are there now, we don't make them change until they come back for a sign
Yeah,
permit. I
but,
don't
so
know
yeah,
that
I
we-
think, I think this should be addressed at the sign permit stage.
Yes, I agree.
It's just not, it's hard to do without
Yeah.
seeing it done and built and,
I don't have a photo now. The signs that, you don't see any signs there now like this.
No.
So all the tenants, the new tenants apply for signs, they've been approved, and new signs are up already, approved by the village. So all we are saying is, the background will be exactly how the village wants it, and then the signs that you already approved, they just go as they are.
sounds good to me, except if they end up not working. So like if it's a black background and they're black letters and they have to change it, then they have to change it. If that makes sense.
That's what they call it, I think they're maroon.
Okay,
Facade is this-
They may be okay as they are.
this right
Yeah.
here, this
I
back.
just hate to go to the tenants because they went through hell to get these signs.
The white-
And I hate to
this
put
big-
it through
yeah,
hell
and then
again.
this is going-
I certainly think you could put that issue off until we see the signs and what it looks like. Maybe we can get a drawing on the signs on the color background so you can see what it looks like.
Which is,
But,
Yeah.
it's white right now.
Putting those signs up,
And then
they're gonna
their signs,
trigger some sort of review.
which are already.
So we can-
Right, and that could always be discussed if, even if they do want black lettering or they want darker signage, it could be something where they have a panel behind it that is a lighter color to offset the signage. It's something that could be worked on at a later point. I think that really this is more focused on the second story addition and how that's gonna
Yeah.
be changing it.
Okay. I think we had, at least, we had a discussion, I think, last time about the facade and touching the building
Yes,
to the, to the
to the south.
east, right?
East.
Well, the south face of the building touching,
Right.
going to the east. The tenant at the time, I think he's still there in that building, was adamant about keeping a space.
Correct, and we're maintaining the space, so the parapet is the only
Oh, so it's just the-
element that's actually
just a-
connected.
Looks like a
Fascia or-
Correct.
Yep.
correct.
Oh, okay,
So
perfect.
behind that facade
Yeah.
is open.
So
it
it's a
allows
false-
natural light to,
Right.
you know.
False facade or
Right.
something, yeah.
Right.
It's like the western buildings, right?
Exactly.
Just the front. Okay, we have any, did you have comments from the staff report from Joe Sanzano? Or are they in the staff report now?
They're in the staff report. I believe the only thing that changed, let me see, I underlined, I think the only thing that changed in the staff report
Oh,
on page
okay.
3. Just noting that the applicant revised their plans to reflect ARC comments, per the request from the April meeting.
Okay, so
And
there
that's
was
reflected in the
nothing
resolution.
additional than we haven't already talked about.
No, because they had gone to the ARC before last meeting. It's just, we received the ARC comments a little close to the finish line, so we just kind of did more of a blanket statement that
Okay.
they will adhere to it per planning board's request, and they ended up doing that. So it was updated.
Okay, so we should be prepared to vote on the final resolution. And I think we've already looked at the one from April. I don't know if anybody had any comments? Questions, comments?
No, go with it.
Okay. All right. Everybody's okay with it? And I gotta, we have to, does it have the new date on it? It does, okay. I have the prior, okay. No problem.
so I motion we approve the resolution.
Can I get a second? Barbara, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Next up is 1515 Main Street, AKA Earth Dog. And Amy is here, but you can come up. Okay, so we received revised plans on April 26th, but the comment was only one thing was updated? I don't know. I can't read my own notes. The title sheet was updated. That was it? Okay. All right. So,
I believe we submitted the narrative that Tom had requested as well.
We didn't receive anything until the meeting when the designer, I believe, brought new drawings. But we didn't receive a narrative, and it was just, he brought the new drawings at the time, so we didn't have any time to review it. That was the last I think we received, and then you submitted the plans afterwards, but.
Well, we submitted the digital plans and the narrative in the same email.
We never got that.
Am I losing it? Okay.
so
So, yes, we could submit that. I actually have it, so I don't know like what happened and why it wasn't, I have no idea, but I'll resend that. So, but you guys didn't actually review plans yet, that we submitted. No. We had emailed and then submitted hard copies to you guys about a
Right,
week
that
and a
was-
half ago.
Right, after the last meeting.
After
So
the last
since
meeting, correct.
This past meeting, though,
The only change I noticed, and there was an update to the title sheet, correcting the sheet names.
Yeah, I think that's all that you and Tom Volpez spoke about last time.
Yeah, correct.
Besides the narrative. Yeah,
Correct,
okay.
correct.
All right, good. So with that said, is there any further changes needed on the plans, or are the plans now acceptable?
They are acceptable in terms of what we asked for.
Okay.
As far as information.
So I'll send you guys the narrative. And then I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Freeling and Mr. Burke about the PILOP, process. I can't, like, I just want to know which way it's
Sounds
going.
like they could go to the zoning board now.
Well, my question is, do we have to?
No, you do not have to go to the planning board at this time, I mean, to the zoning board at this time,
Excellent.
okay?
So
Short
we'll pay
answer.
for PILOT. That was easy. So originally in the last meeting, we were discussing reapplying for PILOT. There were some developments in the meantime, and basically what we'll do is we will likely just pay the PILOT fee instead of going to zoning board. But I'm going to discuss that with my client so she can make the final decision, and then we can figure out what we're doing from there.
Approximately how many parking spaces will you be able to get on site?
So, how many will we be able to get? There's like 5. Yeah, there's only 5.
Is that
We
on the
need
side
17.
or the back or
In the, yeah.
in the front only? Nothing nothing on the side parallel, you can't fit, or anything in back?
No, the side is gonna act as like a pass-through for pickup and drop-off, and in the back, there's really not enough room to safely have parking. So, let me turn back to Tom. So, what are my next steps here? I go to PILOT, I do, or zoning board, whatever we're gonna do. But what are we doing as far as getting to the point where we could go to public hearing? Can we do that now? Oh, Ms. Freeling. We were just, well, not we, because it's me here. I was just wondering when we could go to public hearing now for Earth Dog. Before PILOT, right? Like, I wouldn't, okay. Okay. Correct. Okay. Right. Yeah, I would hate to have my client pay the payment in lieu of parking if ultimately, for whatever reason, there's gonna be an issue with us getting our planning board approval. So with that said, how do we find out what the date would be? Do you guys recommend that today, or do I get in touch with Deirdre? No. I wanna know when we could set the public hearing for the planning board. Okay. All right, perfect. So Tom, I will email you tomorrow. That's all I got for this one, so hopefully we're, on our way. Okay? Yeah. No, it's, yeah. This is an extensive review.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
I have the next one too, so let me go grab that file.
You do?
And I
That's
also have,
tonight, right.
I have Michael Morbillo, the design professional.
Okay.
It's the building around the corner.
It's the corner of East Main and Main,
Yes.
opposite the tax bill.
They brought an easel.
Ooh. Okay. All right.
Shall I begin?
You can begin.
Okay. So, Michael and I stepped into this file recently. We just kind of like went through a few things. Deirdre and I had a discussion when we were last supposed to go before the zoning board, which was, I guess, about 3 weeks ago. We ended up adjourning that because I realized, along with Deirdre, that we felt like some of the variances were not included in the original recommendation. And what we didn't want to do was go to zoning board only to go back to zoning board. So what we realized, the items we realized were missing were the part of the code that talks about landscaping in the front, and also, what was the other one, Deirdre? I can't remember.
Similar to staff report, I think.
Oh, and the parking.
Yeah, it's on the last page.
Yes.
There's also the dwelling unit, which I don't think that would be a viable variance that the ZBA would grant, but that would be something that technically you can go to the ZBA to get varied. Would not support it though.
Oh, you're talking about the size of the units?
Yes.
Yeah, that, Mike, you were gonna redesign a bit, those apartments, right, if I remember correctly? Yeah, okay. So with that said, Mike redesigned, or didn't redesign, Mike designed his own site plan. I know that you guys were working with the prior design professional site plan. So we would like to just, focus on Mike's new site plan only that was submitted. We do have
I wonder if we could time out for
Oh,
just a minute.
yeah,
Deirdre did prepare a really great staff report. I'm just wondering if you could hit the highlights.
Yeah, so the new drawings were much clearer than the previous ones, which helped staff a lot, just kind of really get more in-depth reviewing it and seeing where there might be things that could be fixed or things that really just can't be fixed. Like Amy said, one of the variances that were technically missed was a 20-foot landscaping buffer. that's probably not feasible, but it should be included in the variances that are being requested. But there are also issues with the unit sizes. They're just way too small. It's similar to Conifer, where you need at least 400 square feet for one-bedroom apartments. Habitable space, some of these units are just meeting 406 square feet altogether, including non-habitable spaces. So the density of what is proposed is just too great for the area and what is proposed based off of the comp plan. There's also issues with the parking lot. I believe there's been mention that there was an easement or an agreement or a variance at some point. We haven't seen it yet, though. It would definitely be something we would want to look at, because right now I don't know how they have any parking for the residents that would be proposed there. And actually, when I did a site visit earlier this week, I was told by someone who has an office in the area that they assumed that all the parking spots were reserved for the office patrons, but half the parking spaces are also reserved for the post office. So there is definitely a parking issue that needs to be addressed, and that's something where I don't know if it, with the whole PILOT versus zoning board, how that would be handled. And
Yeah,
in
I
this
don't-
case, it's just there's not enough. And if the apartment sizes are going to change, then the only way to do that would be decreasing the amount of apartments, and then that would also change the parking count. So there's still a lot of little things that kind of need, or not so much little, big things that need to be worked through to get a much clearer, more feasible plan for this site. It's not impossible, it's just right now, from what we have, it's not very feasible and not something that staff can support.
So the minimum size for one bedroom is 400 square feet?
Of
For habitable space, so not including bathroom, not including closet, not including a hallway or walkway through even
Okay.
open spaces.
I was just trying to clarify that, because I was looking at the numbers and I'm like, why are we talking about this?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'll let Mike chime in, but I think part of the plan was, in addition to the site plan, is that you were also going to obviously do construction plans. And if I recall, when we spoke a while back, we were potentially going to consider maybe a redesign of, and making some of the apartments larger. Does that, am I remembering that correctly?
If we're not meeting on those requirements for habitable space, then our only option would be to combine a couple of the apartments that are the 400 square feet.
Yeah, because your FAR is off.
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah,
You
yeah, I
have
mean,
to increase the size of the.
The FAR is off. Well, the FAR is off because we're adding in an egress stair.
It was off before.
Yeah, the FAR for the area is 2. I think the existing building is 2.13, and with the 3 additions that are being put on, the staircase and a third story and a second story, it now gets to, I believe, 2.2. So that would also be another variance that they would have to achieve.
Yeah.
And that's on the request.
Yeah,
Yep, that was requested.
And the parking,
Well,
like,
the
there's no
is-
parking.
The parking, there's no parking on site. When you look at the calculation as far as parking required for the site, which is 42, we're decreasing the amount of needed parking. So we're going from 42 to 32, as it stands right now with the current apartment count. So,
But
we're,
I think it's a wholly different discussion when you're talking about people going to their office and parking. And you're talking about people coming home with groceries and parking. Like, I don't see how you're going to get around parking in general for that many spaces. I mean, sure, a few here and there, but as far as I understand, you don't even have parking in the rear. That's not your property.
Striped spaces.
That's not their property.
It's not their property. And you still need an easement to be able to even get to your refuse.
Well, the refuse is moving onto their site, I believe. But that's also another
But access
logistic
to
that we
it,
would like to
yeah.
kind of look more into, because the drainage is right by where the dumpster would be and right by where the exit for the staircase would be. It is all on their site, but I'm just not sure the logistics if that would even really work. So there's still some reworking that needs to be done.
Is there, do you have a digital copy of the site plan that could go on the
Yes,
screen?
I believe
Okay.
so.
Well, you guys can see it, 'cause we,
Did the issue of the 2 buildings having that weird elevator where it's like half, because it's a half story off.
With two different doors, I think, right?
Yeah.
Facing two different directions.
So all of this is not your property?
Correct. That's
It's not there.
So,
No, trust me, it's,
So this is the property line up around here. I think it kind of cuts in weird here and like that. So all the parking that's behind here is not on their property. There is noted driveway easement. That's one of the things that we would like to see for our own records, but also to see what the extent of that was agreed on. Because there is parking within the driveway easement.
That's also access for the post office, that's an
Yep.
access route in there.
Yeah, but there's parking along here, and there's a dumpster right
Yes,
here, and
yeah,
there's
up
parking.
to the church.
So that's where, like, we would need to see what the easement says.
Yeah. My question is, I understand that there's a change in the nature of the building, but from a planning standpoint, regardless of where people have apartments and other things, because there's apartments throughout Main Street, and, we need to reduce the number of apartments to meet the size, people still have to walk from municipal parking to get to their apartments. So there's nothing on site there right now, whether it's an office employee. or
okay,
resident.
name one place downtown though. This is, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So my understanding is, a lot of East Main Street, there's shops, 3 apartments. There's 2 apartments. There's 1 apartment. You're talking about taking an entire building, making it all, I'm assuming there's still retail on the bottom, but then the rest of it, you're highly, to me, it's almost an intensification of the use. And you're creating an apartment complex that then has no parking, no way of loading or unloading. There's no loading zone. It's like you're taking something and making it, I don't see how that's even a possibility.
Well,
Like-
I think we're de-intensifying, I'm not following that line of reasoning so much, we're de-intensifying
I
a
just-
building's usage, from all that office space and all of those 42 parking spaces to less, and then possibly even more, because if we are combining, say we're reducing it down to, in order to meet that requirement, not including hallways and closets, we would go from 10 down to 6 apartments, because we have
Okay.
to combine 2 of the 400 square foot apartments. If we look at the plans, if
6.
we're able to scroll through that at all. Just the layout of the buildings, we have 2 apartments on these levels here, which are those 400, there's these 600 units, 2-bedroom units here. So if that's, again, looking at the code a little bit more closely, if those had to be combined to single apartments to meet the.
Well, you might be able to get away, instead of going from 5 on the floor to 4 on the floor.
Potentially, yes. We're looking at like the existing structure, it's an older building, there's a structure line down the middle, things like that, we're working with.
But that would only be a total of 8. That would, I would
So, but we're looking at potentially a reduction from 10 to either 8 or 6. So, but either way, the numbers are the numbers. People, 42 spaces to 32, or potentially less if it's 26 spaces, whatever.
Where the employees that currently come to the building now as its office, where do they currently park?
Municipal park.
It's vacant right now. The two, the second and third story are office zoned, but they're vacant right now. So there is no one accessing the second and third story, as far as I know. Most of the parking is for the building next to it with those offices, not necessarily this building.
But that building did have offices and they did utilize, they never had parking on
Yeah,
the
up until
site,
recently.
and they did utilize municipal parking, so as of right, they can go and put in offices back in there and have 42 more spaces taken up in municipal parking that may not presently be used, but they have a right to use that. So this is, on paper, is a de-intensification. Plus, it's an adaptive reuse
Well,
of the building for the
hypothetically,
community.
not really. Again,
The building right now, we need all the services.
garbage is going to be intensified. you know, and to me, 8 or 10 apartments, Amazon Prime, moving in, moving out, garbage, deliveries, where is any of that going to happen?
You know, I think one thing you have to bear in mind is, you know, this is the second and third floor of these buildings built out as office space. It's not commercially viable anymore. That's the big problem. You have a
But how would
white
you have,
elephant.
yeah, I guess I'm just.
Something has to happen there.
The purpose of this application is to utilize or find the best use for this building under current circumstances. And while I do realize that obviously all the bigger apartment complexes that have been built over recent years provide parking, they definitely don't provide enough parking. I wasn't involved in any of those transactions, but
They
I-
actually, the two that were built over here, they have plenty of parking.
Yeah, but that's like a diamond in the
On-site
rough. Yeah,
parking.
I mean,
Right.
the other ones don't. So it's not an unusual circumstance. I mean, it's always about parking down here. It really is. Over and over for many years, and there's always a way to figure it out, in my opinion. At least I have, you know, in most of the applications I've been involved in.
I mean,
So,
from an environmental standpoint, this is, as much I understand certain intensifications, but we're reusing a building, and which is, from a carbon footprint standpoint, is something that people look at. They want to preserve building stock and not tear down a building and reconstruct. So, I mean, in one sense, reduction in parking, adaptive reuse, good for the environment, carbon footprint. Those are some things I think that have to come into the equation on this. But I understand those other things. There is some space around the buildings, but I work in an office. I get more stuff delivered Amazon to my office than I get to my residence. A lot of people have that. These are just part of today's, issues that we all have to face. So, I get that, but I think on whole, we're reducing parking in the village by getting this to apartments and also meeting a community need and doing something that's economically viable.
Question for the board. For the application we just heard across the street here, where they're proposing 3 one-bedrooms on that new second floor, do those 3 bedrooms, I can't recall, which don't exist now, are they gonna have parking on site for those 3 new?
They had a parking agreement that was discussed, and they gave part of the land, I believe, to the county and something then back to the village, so, and they were originally approved with 5 apartments, so they actually, their use is less intense than when they were previously approved with 5, now down to
But even those 3 apartments, let's just say 3 or 6 people, if there's 2 people in each one, move in, I know there's a history, will they have a dedicated parking spot across the street? So I don't know if we can hold this applicant to a higher standard than we're holding someone else.
It's 3 apartments as to 10.
Well, it could be 3 versus 6.
Well, we
Yeah.
would need to see the 6 apartments then. Right now, they're proposing
Yeah.
10. So going off of 10, that could be easily at least 20 people in an apartment if there's 2 people per 1 bedroom. And if it's 3 apartments, then that's 6 versus 20, more than double the amount. So the intensity of 10 apartments is much greater than the 3 where they did figure out the parking. It might not be specifically noted for that property, but this is proposing 0 parking for the apartments, where that had the municipal lot backing up to it, so at least there was an easier route for the apartment residents to get from their apartment to their car. In this case, they would have to cross the street, go around an alleyway, go down some steps. This is a little bit of a mightier task for them to handle.
It's the same for the people who will be working there, though. For people who are working there, going in and out, they have to do the same move.
Well,
So-
that's the thing, the offices, I believe, have the parking spaces in the back. That was what I was told from someone that works in the office, that they assumed that all those parking spaces were for the offices. So those are denoted for them.
Yeah, there's not 42 parking spaces.
There's also not offices on the 2nd and 3rd story, so
Well,
it's
no,
a
there's
hypothetical
not right now,
weight.
there wasn't.
yeah, there was up until
Right,
recently.
right now.
Yeah.
We want to make it better than what was proposed. So we want to make it a better use.
Who owns that entire parking field back there? Is that the office building owner?
I think it might be the
It's
post office
Well, the
building,
post
yeah.
office property,
Yeah.
not the
the
post
federal
office doesn't
government,
take
yeah.
owns the property, but,
Right.
yeah. But they own it.
The whole
Who is
east-
here?
The driveway
Yeah.
on the Main Street, wrapping around East Main Street.
I'm not sure the easement or that connecting piece, but I thought it was part of the post office property also. I have to verify that.
I've never seen the easement, so I have
Yeah.
absolutely no knowledge of
I'd
that.
say right on the map too.
So Amy, I don't know if we're permitted to speak.
Uh,
Is that this owner of?
Typically, but if you want to provide some information, fine. You can sit here if you want.
Good evening, John Huber, B-E-R, Boston Schmidt Huber, attorneys for Colatasti family, owners of 407 East Main Street. I had submitted a very lengthy letter to the zoning board in advance of the hearing that was scheduled for I guess that was April 18th. It's voluminous, I have a lot of copies here in case the board wanted at least to reference that. I lay out basically a thesis on why this is not a viable application. No, there is no parking easement agreement for 415, 417 to use the 19 parking spaces that are at
overall, lot, tax lot map you had before?
Is this property Calatasi? Calatasti.
Yeah, that is, just for the record, that's 407 East Main Street. The tax map number is 206-12-10-3.3. Colatasti family went through an extensive planning board application some years ago. And we, at that time, tried to have a 5-property easement agreement, including these 2 subject parcels, the church, the Vane Center, and the Colatasti property. The Perillo representative did not want to participate at that time, so that easement agreement did not go forward. This easement on the lower corner there at the southwest corner, correct? That easement was entered into back in, I think, 1974, and that is only for the benefit of 417. Allowing that easement to be used for both of these buildings, which are separate properties under separate ownership, is overburdening that easement. There is not an easement agreement in place to allow any parking for these proposed apartments on the Colatasti property.
Mr. Huber, can you just clarify, so is there an easement or isn't there an easement agreement?
There is an access easement. At the time that the 417 East Main Street was the Jefferson Shore Secretarial School, there was a doorway that came at the back of the Secretarial School. And it was very generic language, and it just said access easement.
Was that easement ever rescinded?
Well, it's recorded to county clerk.
Yeah.
It was not rescinded.
Okay, so that easement still exists today for the purposes of parking at 417 East Main Street?
No, it's not parking. Access.
Just access, okay,
Yeah, and.
Well, we're not proposing any parking in there.
Right. okay.
So it's not.
And it's just for
The purpose would be to get access to a dumpster or something.
Just for-
That's all, basically.
So, and I outlined this in the letter I had written to the zoning board. It's in the village's file. I have copies of the letter. I could leave those with the board if the board members would like to see it. I made extra copies for tonight. I have plenty of copies. And we could probably get that. It's instructed, there's copies of the easement in there marked up. Jennifer Sigler's memo she thoroughly evaluated this. That was dated August 27, 2019. Jennifer did an extensive memo about all of the issues that are in question here. To me, the elephant in the room is these are 2 separate buildings, 2 separate tax lots under separate ownership. This application completely ignores that and treats this as if this is one building. And, at a minimum, the Suffolk County Real Property Tax Service Agency in Riverhead would have to reconfigure this and make this one lot.
Yeah, we
That
can
was-
consolidate
that was a
lots, yeah.
condition, yeah.
Well,
That's not, I mean,
absolutely.
that's as of right, yeah.
That's down the road, right? I mean, but we can't just get an approval to make apartments in these buildings until that's done.
Mhm.
Well, that was a condition on that.
Yeah.
From this, this board from the planning department, yeah.
Yeah, this, I'm sure you're aware of the history, but this was originally submitted with a different design professional and a different, you know, like, Michael and I were not involved until very recently, so we're just trying to kind of, you know, clarify the site plan and connect all the dots.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, there's a lot of dots to be connected.
yes, we've been connecting them.
So, and I understand, all due
Mhm.
respect.
Yeah.
You have an
Mhm.
excellent reputation.
Thank you.
And so, I'm not here to be confrontational. Obviously, I have a client who's got a very important, important stakeholder.
Right.
I have to agree that I think this is an intensification because every day that parking lot behind the Colatasti building is filled with vehicles that are not associated with occupancy in that office building.
Right.
These are people who go to Revival, who go to Pasta Pasta. So it is not a stretch of the imagination that when you have, say we're down to 6 apartments, that the residences of those apartments are going to be parking in the Colatasti property.
Well, that's
How do we
speculation,
prevent that?
yeah.
Well, it's
We can't really look in a
speculation.
crystal ball and, you know.
Well, I think it would also turn a blind eye to a situation that's a probability.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's
how can
always,
we
there's
prevent
always
that?
probability.
How do we prevent that? It's a code enforcement issue, actually.
Right.
Because then Colatasti will have to call the constable and say there are unauthorized people
To your,
parking in
if I may, to your point though, no matter who goes in there and tries to park, is gonna have the same situation. What I'm getting maybe frustrated about is, I hear everybody's point. I hear everybody's point, but you have a building sitting there pretty much fallow. How do we improve it? How do we get it back to life? I agree, there's no parking next door, and I know you went to a lot of trouble to make that happen. But, and whatever goes in there, you're gonna have that issue of dealing with who's ever in there. The question I have for the professionals is, you know, you're looking to reduce the number of apartments, and that's great. So then, for the board, I guess, or for staff, how do we deal with it? You know, we can't make parking. We know that there's municipal parking. It's not ideal. You know, do we further reduce the number of units in there? Is that gonna help? You know,
Would it not be a pileup, just like the
That's
town
what
for
I'm, yeah, that's what
13?
I'm saying.
That's-
And then,
that's always the path
unfortunately,
forward.
when this building was moved, whenever it was, nobody was taken into consideration.
Right.
The parking, they just moved the building and, you know, it's with a lot of the stuff in the village.
Mhm.
It's a continual problem we deal with. You know, it just seemed, I agree with the, you know, the less units I feel are better, the less units you have in there, I feel it's gonna be a better product at the end of the day. I think it's a cool building, you know, the owner has a lot that he can work with, but to sit here and hammer back and forth between parking, it's kind of like, it's futile.
Yeah. Mike and I are both operate in a very kind of reasonable manner with our applications, where neither one of us ever want to bring an application to any board that is completely ridiculous. So, you know, we would not be agreeable even, you know, if our client insisted in bringing undersized apartments before the zoning board of appeals. So that was a discussion Mike and I had with the proprietor, you know, in the very beginning, that there may have to be a reconfiguration of how these apartments are laid out, making them, you know, to code, et cetera. So, and that's something that Mike will be working on with the owner. So, you know, there's hope for that to be resolved. And then, once again, it comes down to parking, because it always comes down to parking. And PILOP and zoning board are the two operations of relief. I mean, PILOP was created years ago, I think in 2018, specifically to create a fund to use that money to create more parking. municipal parking. So, you know, that was the purpose of it, because parking was a problem. And I guess at the time, the consensus was that it was silly to keep having people go before zoning board of appeals and then giving the parking relief for nothing. Wasn't doing anything. So here we are.
Do you know, what's the distance to a municipal parking lot that's allowable to use some of those spaces? 200 feet, I believe? Do you have any portion of your property that's within 200 feet of a municipal lot, not either across, down behind Ruvo, or
Yeah, we're probably
in
close,
the other
but I don't
direction
think
across the
200.
street, down the stairs? Probably not.
It's, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a municipal parking lot.
We would have to do a
Yeah.
radius.
So,
Yeah.
again, just to weigh in, the owner could have had a parking easement, could have, chose not to.
Well, we
don't
unfortunately,
Was I not here? I was here.
What we were advised, we went.
Oh, okay.
we
I'm sorry.
experienced-
Are we talking about many years ago, or are we talking about?
So-
What would that have changed? I just,
So-
on the surface, what would that have changed?
Well, there would have been an agreement.
Yeah.
Sorry. There would have been an agreement in place where they would have been able to at least access the parking. The landowner chose not to, so now they're faced with essentially not having
But
permission.
let's look at that just from, the surface here for a minute. It doesn't change the number of parking spaces that are there, which I think if that property was part of that, would certainly overburden their lot, right? 42 parking spaces needed in, I don't know, there's a dozen or so, 15 spaces, whatever's in there now. So, again, we're still working, this is like all the other buildings that predate zoning that don't have parking, that occupy close to 100% of the property. We're in that same game here with this. There's no parking for the building. If they did become part of this parking easement arrangement, this is really just an access easement. There's no on-site, there's nothing there. So,
I guess the point is that,
No, is it that deal, and could you reignite this conversation?
I don't know what it does.
What were the
Yeah,
terms?
say anything come up. I don't know.
I don't know the
From a practical
answers.
point of view, I think residential use overnight, you use parking overnight and then use it during the day.
It would-
be a joint use that
It would-
work a little bit at least.
It would also give the applicant the ability to, it's going to be first come, first serve, who's ever in there. So there's not, the 5 spots to the left for this building, if it's first come, first serve, it's a
Oh,
pig
also
pile.
Or designated parking.
Right,
If
I mean-
if it's private parking lot, you can
Technically
control
on the
all
spot,
those
yes.
areas.
Well, that's what they have
So this,
now.
this is
So
the post office only.
essentially, because of your client's lack of action,
Yeah.
they can't park there, which is a problem that you now have to overcome.
Right.
Yeah.
I get it, but.
I need to get a little bit
Still,
more
when you get
history
all
on
these
that.
Parking spaces, 40-something parking spaces into that area.
No, you-
I can't look back as, we're a part of any of that, or what the reasoning was for being involved with that, but still would have not met the need for that building, if they had
Absolutely.
anticipated. So,
What could you do as of right tomorrow?
as of right tomorrow, offices, we could fill it up.
If you found someone willing,
Feasible from a marketing
Yeah.
standpoint, but somebody could move their entire business in there, and as of right, they have 42 spaces. There's a CO for it, and somebody's gotta find where 42 cars are going in the village,
During the day. It's just really, the burden just flips between day and night. People go out to work, then they come home to their apartment and they park. People leave their apartment and they go to work and park the car. It's really, it's the same difference.
But, listen, if there is something that can lessen the intensity, then,
Yeah.
totally we gotta look at it, and, if it's, actually, I wasn't aware that I looked at the numbers on the surface, probably there's maybe previous, plan preparer, the design first look at it, like, it's 400 square feet, what's the issue? You just laid it out, like,
Habitable,
you know,
yeah.
include the bathrooms and the closets and everything else, so that gets us, we're not 10 apartments, we're either 6 to 8, depending on how you lay it out, once you look at it from that standpoint, so.
Probably up to 650 square feet.
Yeah.
question on, let's just assume you do have 6 or 8 apartments in there. They would be rentals, not ownership? rentals.
Yes.
And would you be willing to designate usually a 10%, at least one of them as affordable or workforce?
Well, that, yeah, I think by operation of law, we have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think we provide copies.
Yeah, I can,
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
How many you have?
Oh, I have, I think 8, I'll leave this whole stack here.
Okay.
There's plenty to go around for everyone.
All right, and this whole package went to the zoning board?
Yeah, zoning
last
board,
month.
shortly before that matter was
Okay.
adjourned, and so I thought tonight, let me bring these just in case, and I really did an exhaustive analysis. There's exhibits with a copy of the easement on there. There's a copy of the actual document that's recorded at the Suffolk County Clerk that created that access easement. The board can look at that language, so I'll just.
All right,
leave those.
thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be.
Mr. Huber, can I have a copy?
Absolutely.
And then, Deirdre, do you wanna get, kind of give them the bullet points of your staff report of all the things? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you have all
Yeah,
the things
staff
that
report.
has to happen.
I guess my, ooh, sorry. Hold on.
I don't know.
Um,
Everybody wants a copy?
My,
I'll take one.
um, right, that was another thing, yeah. Yeah, we are on disaster and we're disaster. So then,
That's a good question.
so would it be appropriate to proceed with zoning board or we have to wait until we figure, okay, the parking, okay, all right, okay. So we'll do that, we'll resubmit, come back, and then we'll be able to jump to zoning board.
Can, do we need to though say, hey, they need to go to zoning board, or they can just go to zoning board because they think they need to? Anytime they want.
Good point.
Okay. Yeah.
We'd like to see more sustained plans that we would have faith in to see at the zoning board. And for the board also to be comfortable sending them to the zoning board with plans that they also think are feasible.
I think what you're asking though is, because you guys used to recommend, and that would act as the denial, is that what you're asking? Or can we just
Yeah.
go to the building
Right,
department?
yeah.
I believe Mr. Freeling clarified that in one of the last meetings, where we would just go the normal route of zoning board, get our denial from the building department and file. Right? Okay. Alrighty then. Well, thank you very much.
Just one more thing.
Sure.
Just, the distance to municipal, yes, thank you. The distance to municipal parking, is that still in the code? Or,
I was told when, yeah,
just
because.
take a look.
Yeah, the man that bought my building said it no longer existed, so that's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Some about 140 feet and stuff.
140 feet, that's close.
Yeah.
Yeah, we figured that out before, so.
Okay.
All right,
All
thank
right,
you. Good
thanks.
night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thanks.
All right, next up is 100 Oakland Avenue. Have anybody here from the applicant? No. No, but we can just, yeah.
It's, south of North Country Road, across from Grumpy Jack's.
Oh.
Yeah.
East side of the street.
Yeah,
West side, sorry. Side down.
That's it.
Whatever.
I think all we need to do is go through the staffing report on this, just talk about it.
Yeah, there's one, he was the one in the back.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, he was the one. Yeah, this is from the front.
I did a nice job with this.
So it's the roof on the right.
So for this one, we asked for more information because we want to know if they would be inputting a transformer or something that would be on the ground and that at some
Right.
point require setbacks or landscaping screening, we weren't sure. We requested it, we just got something right after I sent the staff report today.
Oh.
So it will be a meter along the side, which you can kind of see on the
Okay.
street, there's a
Mhm.
bunch of meters along
Yep.
there. Right now, we would just request that it goes to the ARC because they're not very pretty on the side of the building, and we would like to see some screening along it just for that. But one of the other things that we also requested was a updated survey. Right now, their survey is the next page, and it's not very legible. We can't tell how much of a buffer space they might have to play with for screening. If it's 6 inches, if it's 2 feet, we just are not sure, so we can't really help in that way or tell ARC what they have.
We have any renderings of what they
That's all we have received today. I have specs for the solar panels themselves. They'll be parallel to the pitch of the roof on the south side, so what you're looking at now. And they'll only be raised at max 6 inches from the roof. So they won't be sticking out, they're not gonna be at an angle up. The main concern right now is screening for the meter that will be added to it. And if the ARC has any other comments about what is proposed, we would welcome those as well.
Yeah, we,
really need to find out the sidewalk that is.
Right, that's what you can't tell very well from,
It's more like a gravel landscape area, it looks like.
there is a sidewalk there, I could zoom in a little bit.
So while Deirdre's doing that, while there are site plan issues, minor maybe site plan issues, I think one of the reasons why the building inspector just so you know, the original jurisdiction for this would be at the building inspector. He chose to refer it to the planning board. We reviewed it. We agreed. I think one of the reasons why I think it should be at the planning board is because this is a precedent-setting project. There are no solar panels on any roofs in the district. This would be the first project. And there are architectural considerations when you put solar panels on a building, and it changes the whole look of the building, things like that. So I think that we wanted to make sure we took a hard look at this one, even though it seems like a relatively simple application. I think the ramifications of the project will set precedent as other people decide that they want solar panels on their roof, things like that. So I think that we just want to take a hard look at how the board and the department want to address solar panels.
And are you saying in the whole village, only commercial or residential?
In the C2 district, this
C2
is the
district.
first project that I know of that has solar panels on the roof, requesting solar panels on the roof.
Has the building
Yet
department approved others in other zoning districts recently?
I think we approved one other application for solar, but I'm not, it was not during my tour duty,
Not for commercial.
not for commercial.
And I completely agree. But I also want to can we look at this as almost a generic type of application so that we create a checklist? Because I don't want to make it harder for people to get. If people have to go, they can't just go to building to get solar panels and then they have to schedule a hearing and.
Right.
So I agree. I'm really glad that you brought it here, but I also want to create a path
Right.
forward.
We've had some discussions, I think Ray and I had a little discussion. There are just particular issues with regard to putting up solar panels. For one, the power generation, are they gonna store the power on site, or are they gonna put it right into the meter system, that kind of stuff. Also, there's glint and glare issues, particularly if you're in an approach way. This building is close to Mather Hospital, which is gonna have a helicopter approaching and leaving and stuff. We need to know the flight paths, and if there's a glint and glare analysis, that would need to be done. So while it seems like it's relatively simple, there are some issues that go around solar panels, and they're evolving. And it would be nice to know and get some specs on what these panels are, because the next generation of solar panels might be flat right into the roof. Don't know. But
Mhm.
So they're evolving, but again, this is the first application in the C2 district on a one-story building that's looking for solar panels. And it's not a flat roof, so.
Yeah, I'd just like to see us work on trying to streamline and make this happen.
Well,
And as painless as possible for people.
The code sets it up to be streamlined. The building inspector can look at it and approve it. We felt that this is the first one. The building inspector was like, this is the first one, so let's take a hard look at it.
Pitched roof versus a flat.
There are plenty of them.
Yeah.
Right, but there are plenty of roofs that could have solar. See to the background.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, I think-
Your rendering to see how low those panels are gonna go, I mean, you know, you can get people up on that roof easily.
What do you mean by that?
So are the panels going to sit towards the peak of the roof?
So,
The
yeah, I
placement
could bring
of
up
them.
the drawings that'll show
Yes,
the
yes,
design
I
along the
didn't
pitch of the
know
roof.
that, yeah.
It does look like it's probably taking up 80% of that whole entire pitch of the roof, so it is taking up majority of it. But I could also pull up the drawings, and drawings are there as well.
Yeah, it's a perfect angle for it.
There.
To take up the whole roof.
So it takes the whole thing, and there's,
So that's something that could also be, if this board wants to consider a certain percentage of the roof that you'd be comfortable for streamlining for them to take up, and then maybe if they go past that percentage, then okay, you have to come in. I don't know if that's also something you'd want to consider.
I think I'm gonna look and try and see if there's a planning, you know, you can do those webinars. I'm gonna see if there's one on solar, and I'll volunteer to take the course and
I think other.
then, you know, go from there and maybe come back with recommendations on things like that.
Andy, hasn't other towns done a lot of work on streamlining?
Yes.
This-
Again, I think we have a very streamlined process. I interrupted that streamlined process by agreeing to bring it to the planning board.
Right, but with the, like, streamlining it with all the concerns that you had.
Like putting
Yes,
restrictions. in
we
our
could
code?
develop, it could be done where we could streamline that out to a punch list that the building inspector would go through.
I think
It can
it's
be
been,
done.
I think it's been done
And
elsewhere.
other municipalities have a streamlined process in the county. When I was there at the county, we also came up with a model code for streamlining solar. So it's out there.
Right.
I think the
My
village,
concern is it becomes too close to the gutter, let's say the gutter. It's a target for damage.
It's a good thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know what, it's gonna be funny, is people that caught the new conifers, they'll be looking at you, glaring at you.
Although this is at a different angle, so, you know, and the helicopter to Mather comes in from the east, supposedly supposed to
Yeah,
come from the
well,
west.
yeah.
But it doesn't always come from the east.
Okay, I think we're through with that, right? Any other comments on this one? Yeah, they don't care.
I think staff is just recommending that we request additional information and bring it back to the board.
Oh. Yes.
For more information, about the panels themselves, about something maybe a little fleshed out about the meter that we plan to attach, and then we would recommend going to the ARC for all that.
Okay, but you mentioned other municipalities, right? What they might have in the,
Are we gonna look at what other municipalities are
We
doing?
can look into that, like other municipalities' codes and what they have codified or in applications.
Yeah, that would help.
We could put something together for the next meeting.
Concerned about the coverage of the roof, and you said 80%.
parking lots.
That's what it looks like to me, that would
buildings,
be
too.
the cost for them, that's why
Dave
they
Cologne, I think.
The question currently,
figure it out, but if they probably have the technology, they can figure out which would affect it. But that is something we would also recommend receiving information about.
currently, if a residential home, not in the commercial district, but in a residential district, wanted to put solar on their roofs, on a pitched roof like this, Andy, what's the code allow for them to do that? Is there a certain percentage, a certain type of panel?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head, because we haven't had one in, at least since I've been here, so we really haven't done a deep dive on it.
I believe usually that's just the building permits, that would be something that would be handled by the building inspector, not when we get involved. That might have its own separate requirements and codes and thresholds to be upheld.
But-
This is the first plan commercial residence,
But,
commercial district, so it's.
I mean, even in the residential district, are there certain thresholds they have to follow, where a minimum or a maximum coverage, or a certain type of drainage allowed?
It's probably more building code.
There, I just found on the New York Planning Federation website, they have a New York State solar guidebook. And they have solar permitting and inspecting, rooftop access and ventilation, secra, property tax laws,
Oh, good.
all on down. We can look through that,
Yeah.
maybe come up with,
Southampton did adopted its solar code last year. It's a model code. Village of West Hampton Beach. Although we have a controversy in that occasion.
So we don't have any solar code per se?
Nothing applicable to the commercial district for this application, so we were looking at this application
So there's code silent on solar panels?
for commercial districts.
What about residential it talks about?
We didn't look at that, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, we can pull up the code, but I don't know if you want to do that now, we could just bring you back a report.
Yeah.
Do it right now. There you go.
yeah.
Solar, just do solar. Oh, there you go, residential. Just talks about residential. There you go.
Approved equipment.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna give you angles and coverage and things like
It talks about the access,
Five months for.
a lot of fire code stuff.
Roof load.
that. So I can tell you, it's about as simple as it gets. You make an application to the building inspector and he approves it. And the problem is that we have a very touchy building inspector that wants to make sure he does everything right. So rather than expediting it through, he's saying, let's take a hard look at this, and I agree with him, that's all. So we do have a pretty permissive. But I think the point of coverage and things that, things that the board wants to look at, I think would be, something to look at.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about coverage is it depends greatly on the amount of, what the exposure is south. It varies so much from property to property.
And the technology and the vendor, yeah.
You need that south.
You need the south, right.
South
You
facing.
can't, it's not practical just to put, a certain percentage on a low percentage, because then it's just, it doesn't do the job.
I don't
So,
know
Mr.
if the,
Chairman.
oh, sorry. I
I'm
don't know if
sorry,
the
go
board
ahead.
would also want to consider, and again, this could be not so much on a case-by-case basis, but it might be something that they would want to look at depending on the roof type, but maybe how close solar panels are on a pitched roof to residences or to restaurants where there's outdoor spaces. If it's a flat roof, you're not gonna see it, so it wouldn't be something that would impact the space. But if there's a residence across the street, or if there's a residence within a certain feet or mileage or something like that, I don't know if that's something that the board would also, just to consider. In these cases, that could be one of the other checkpoints that we can look at for every application that will come after this.
Yeah, I could see flat roofs too, could have the panels raised, because there's an optical angle.
Right.
So they're not pointing straight up, they're up 22 degrees, or whatever it is. They could, yeah, that's,
That might be something where they go to the ARC for that kind of screening, or
Yeah, could be.
there might be different ways we want to deal with it on a pitched roof versus
Sure.
a flat roof. It's just
Yeah.
more so what to look at.
We had complaints recently on a proposed solar installation in West Hampton. Commercial piece, but they were planning that noise generation. They had a metering system on the ground, so people were concerned that it was going to generate a lot of noise, like a kind of continuous buzzing.
Yeah.
Transform. So it's something.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have a presentation on an issue that we've been talking a lot
Oh,
about.
almost
and
forgot you, Andy.
If you'd like, we could push it off another month, but I think it's a relevant topic. I can try and get through it in less than a half hour if the board would indulge me. Otherwise, I'd be happy to do it next month.
What does the board feel? Might as well do it tonight.
Let's do it.
This goes with
This, Dave's just going to bring up my PowerPoint.
Oh, well, there.
So one of the issues that we were talking about tonight is parking. And when we get to the slideshow, I think it's the second slide, maybe. You want that full screen? Yeah. Okay.
Oops, sorry, Barbara.
Okay, so I did this back in the county, back in, I think it was 2019. You can go to the next slide, please, Steve. So I think all the discussions that we have about parking are treating the symptom. They're not treating the cause, okay? The cause is that we have too many cars for the downtown. And every application that comes in wants to bring in more cars. So the cause is we have too many cars coming in. So what do we want to do? We want to get applicants to reduce the number of cars they need to park in the village. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit of overview just to get everybody, big crowd tonight, so, you know, they may not know some of these facts, but, you know, we're 50 miles east from New York City, which is reasonably close to New York City. You know, we have 3 square miles. We got about 1.5 miles of shoreline. There's about a population about 7,500 people. That fluctuates. Let's just say we're around, we're somewhere closer to 7.9 thousand people, and decreasing according to the census. Yet, if you look at our master plan, we're not going to be decreasing, particularly uptown. So we'll see what happens in the future on that. We have a relatively older population by comparison to the county. We have a median income of $121,000, which is relatively high by comparison to the county. And most of our visitors either come by auto or bus, Uber, or by the train or by the ferry. So that's a little overview. I just love this because I love the picture. When I was with the county, that was the mandate for county to do its planning. But I love that picture. It's hanging in my office, and I got a whole book of cartoons just like that. So anyway, next slide. Well, one of the things during the county in my tour of duty that the then county executive, Steve Ballone, brought as a vision for the county was to improve the connectivity of our roadways and to connect our roadways to major population centers. You can see that transit-oriented developments are identified on the map. Regional assets, the bigger multi-acreage projects. You can see that there was a vision, and there is a vision, to electrify the Long Island Railroad all the way to Riverhead. There's the double track aspect of it that goes to Ronkonkoma. And electrifying the rail was also, and still is, a vision for all of the 3 routes of the Long Island Railroad. The practicality of electrifying the rails changes depending on the line that you had. The biggest bang for the buck would obviously be the center rail. The southern rail is in a lot of floodplains and a lot of repetitive damage areas, and investments in there are only going to have to be reinvested. They may have to raise the track. They may have to do all sorts of things to flood-proof it. And Port Jefferson's line is very curvy and hilly, so you don't get much in the way of speed out of electrification, but what you may get is a 1-seat ride all the way into the city, so it eliminates a transfer. So the vision was there to try and improve the connectivity to all the various development points in the village, in the county, and you can see just by looking at this where the county envisioned development going into the future. So, you know, there's the famous Winedams Rising, you've got the Heartland project, you've got the Ronkonkoma Hub, and then below that would be Midway Crossing. So all these development projects. Next slide, please. So where are we? So there is, in the planning literature and everything that we look at, an intuitive relationship between transit-oriented developments and not needing a car. We talk about it all the time. You are in a walkable community, you don't need a car. And the reason that we talk about that are a couple of reasons. Millennials started this, and now we're into Generation X, Y, Z, et cetera. But millennials their socioeconomic characteristics, they were coming out of school and with a lot of debt. So they didn't want to own a car, they didn't want to maintain a car, they didn't want to pay insurance on a car, they don't want to own homes, they want to live in vibrant communities. So we have these socioeconomic characteristics of the younger generation, which kind of led us towards transit-oriented development, which is walkable. They don't have a car, so they could live in a TOD. And TODs provide transportation options for residents. Okay, next slide. But when we talk about doing all this in TODs, we're still finding that transit-oriented development areas are still congested. Parking stalls are still at a premium. Let's look at Port Jefferson, right? And car ownership continues to increase throughout the area. So if you look at motor vehicle registrations, even though the population is starting to eke downward, motor vehicle registrations are starting to eke up. So what do we do? Next slide, please. So to build parking, these numbers might be a little bit old, but any builder will tell you that building surface parking costs a lot. At the time we did this, it was about $4,500 per space to build a surface lot. It's a lot higher now, right? And that's like, at the time, it was about $225 a month just to cover the expenses of maintenance for surface parking. And again, those numbers are higher. Parking garages at the time was $20,000 to $24,000 a space. I think it's even higher now. And then when you go above that, they start to creep up. So building parking structures is very expensive, and maintaining them is very expensive. And then to a project, actually to the actual unit itself, if a developer is providing 1 to 2 spaces per residential unit, that's going to add a cost of another 6 to 16% per unit that you're going to pay for. So you're paying for your parking spaces anyway. So we looked at different ways to reduce parking. We looked at parking management. And one of the things I like to call this this is sort of like an analogy to wastewater treatment. With wastewater treatment, you do primary treatment. You get all the big pieces out of it. Then you do secondary treatment. You try and get other things. You try and get some of the chemicals out of it. But then there's a thing called tertiary treatment, where you really polish off that water and it goes into the ground drinkable. Okay. Well, with parking, it's kind of the same thing. You want to inventory all your parking. Then you want to take it. You want to make sure it's put in all the right places. The employees are parked in the right spot. Your employers, all the different people, the residents have places to park. So you want to make sure that you have a good mix of where we're putting everybody. And the parking committee now is working on that, trying to separate employee parking, resident parking, and visitor parking. So we've been working on that. But the last thing you want to do, and you can manage your parking through metering and signage and things like that, which the village is at now, but the last thing you want to do is get rid of those cars that you don't want. So that's all about parking management. Some of the techniques in parking management, one of them is one of my favorites, but we're seeing it's failing in the village, but we could talk about unbundling the cost of parking. If you come to me and say, how much is my apartment? And I say it's $1,500 a month, but your apartment costs you $1,000 a month, but I'm charging you, what did I say, 15? I'm charging you $150 a month, whatever, for a parking space. So if I only want to pay $1,000 a month, I don't need 2 parking spaces. I'm going to hop on the train and go to work. I'm going to come home. I'll walk to the grocery store and then walk home. So by unbundling the cost of parking, people see how much their parking spaces are costing them, and if they have options, they may give up a car. Don't need to. Okay, there are rideshare programs where you could go through 511 rideshare and you can make arrangements with people that are commuting to where you work. You can make arrangements to share rides. There are portals where you could create rideshare linkages, if you will. There have been, and depending on administrations, pre-tax commuter benefit programs where you could pay pre-tax dollars into commuting and get a discount. There are compressed work weeks, which take the peaks off the roads. There's bicycle facilities that get more people into bicycle, and they go on. And preferred parking for high occupancy vehicles. So we'll talk about all these little things really quick, and I am going through these quick, so if I sound like I'm rushing, it's because I am. Next slide. Okay, so the locational criteria for TODs originally started being within a quarter mile of your transportation hub or your train station or your bus depot. So ideally, a 5-minute walk or within a quarter mile from that transit location is the ideal TOD. That's been stretching out a little bit because now we have electric scooters, electric bikes. So, you know, if you want to extend it to a half mile, okay. Some municipalities even give high-density zoning even a mile out. To me, that's a little bit, that's not really what TODs were designed for. They're designed for walkability, and that's a quarter mile. But also in a TOD, you know, these are the criterias for the perfect TOD. Port Jeff really has most of them. We have transportation options uptown, for example. You have the bus, you have the train, you have various forms of rentable car service. You have frontage on major streets. The hamlet is a central business district. It's got some shopping. There are community facilities in the area. There's multimodal public transportation. There's recreational. This isn't uptown Port Jeff, by the way, but there's recreational opportunities in the area. So uptown, downtown, they kind of do fit the model for transit-oriented developments. We have public water, we have sewer. The zoning is in place. It's not like somebody has to come in and ask for a change of zone to do a mixed-use, high-density project. So the zoning is in place. And to some extent, we do have compatible surrounding land uses. And you would want that for a TOD. So next slide. But this is what's interesting. This is what makes this TOD concept interesting to developers. For every 900, that's 900 square feet of parking, you can put a 2-bedroom unit in that space. So if we could eliminate parking area, we could give bonuses for floor area. So you start to see a relationship now. If we can find ways to eliminate parking, we have space where we could give a floor area bonus or an incentive to a developer to start to include some of these parking stall demand reduction techniques that we'll talk about. So I think this is a very important slide. So the parking stall demand model tries to create a relationship between, in one instance, increased floor area, increased height for parking stall demand reduction techniques. Next slide. So we haven't gotten into the different techniques. We'll talk about that, but maybe we skip that. Let's do something really quick. Might have missed a slide in the rearrangement. Oh, okay. Okay. So this is a real project in a real village in a real county called Suffolk. Okay, I call this the Frankenstein project. This project had 46,000 square feet proposed of retail, 18,000 square feet of office, and 339,600 square feet of residential. The parking requirement by the local municipalities code, the residential required 2,262 spaces, the office required 102 spaces, the retail required 307 for a total of 2,689 spaces. The applicant was proposing 500. They needed a variance. We went to ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, to say maybe the village code was way off. Sorry, I gave it away. It was a village. Maybe the code was off. So we looked at ITE and we got 828 spaces needed, but they were still only providing 500. So what do? Do we give them a variance? Do we do a pilot? What do we do for those missing spaces? And this is just a block out of the building next. Next slide. So these are some of the techniques of congestion management, and we went through the literature and we found that if you were doing one of these congestion management techniques, the literature demonstrated that there was an actual reduction in parking demand. So we said, whoa, so if we could combine a lot of these things, maybe we could get a reduction and you wouldn't need a variance if you provided some of these techniques. So what we did was and some of them unbundled the cost of parking, an easement for shared parking. If that project that we were just talking about, if they all came up with an easement, by the data and the literature, they would have a 15% reduction in their need for the parking, because the ones who go to work create space for the ones that are coming in, and then they all go home, and then the ones coming back from work come in. So you don't need the parking spaces on the pure multiplier. Cross-access agreements between properties is similar, 15%. This pre-tax benefit, the federal government at one time was allowing you to put money into a pre-tax fund. So if you bought transit passes or things like that, you could use that money and not pay the tax on it. And that was being offered by the government, and some businesses were including that. Rideshare programs, if the planning board went into an agreement with the landowner, and the landowner said, sure, I'll put in a covenant that my residents have to use rideshare programs, and we'll make that part of the apartment lease, you could get a 10% reduction in the parking. If there was a rideshare marquee, Suffolk Community College has in their student center a big giant marquee, and it says, next bus, next train, next ferry. If you have that kind of stuff, you could get a reduction in the parking demand just by, I'm coming down the stairs, I got out of the elevator, and, oh, the train's coming in 10 minutes, okay, reminder, or whatever. You see that often and often, you can start to get reductions in people using their cars. It's in the literature. A bus stop turn off, just a bus stop, and a shelter give you a 5% reduction. HOV preferred parking, so high occupancy. If people are carpooling and they want to, you give them the ability to park right next to the building, whereas people who are using a single occupancy vehicle got to park way out, you can get a reduction. Bike lockers will give you 2% reduction. If you add shower facilities, you get 2%. So we went all the way down and we said, if this project added all those things to its project, they would get an 80% reduction in their parking. And on the right, you can see the stalls that were reduced by the percentage. And guess what? Now we got them down to 534 spaces where they only needed a variance of 34. Using that. And there's a little asterisk to some of this. Next slide, please. So what would the developer get? Well, if we give them a floor area bonus for these various things, you can see how just by adding up the floor area bonuses that the developer, by providing certain parking stall demand reductions, would get a floor area bonus. They could get that fourth floor by including these kinds of things. This could be considered a major public benefit, maybe. And if you know in the C2 district, if you go for a fourth floor, you have to provide a major public benefit. Next slide. So how would this look? Well, we just took all the things that this Frankenstein project did and just tried to figure out how would we do it. Well, we put some metered parking along the street, we put some shared cross-access parking in the front, you throw some lockers in the building, you put bike rack in the front, put a bus turn off on the corner there, you put the information marquee in there, and there's a slice of their bonus right on the side of the building. You get some HOV parking in the back, you know, and you rearrange the site plan with parking mitigation concerns in there, and you could do it. I mean, it's just a sketch or schematic, but that's the concept on what you would do. Next slide. So where is this being implemented? It's being parking stall demand reduction in different ways. It's being implemented all over the place. And next slide. A couple more places and some data that will give you the slide show you.
Can you go back to the last one?
Sure. Next slide. The last slide.
Yeah. Seattle, no parking requirement?
Yeah. Seattle has no parking requirement, and they just offer new tenants a suite of parking stall demand reduction techniques. So that village has, there are villages in Suffolk County that have no parking requirement as well. So you can go to that, you can go back to that extreme, but the municipality is fully invested in providing public parking and public structure. Okay, next slide. Next slide. So the report that we put together was a model code. Looks like this. It's online. You can get it. You can make your hard copies if you want it. The references are in the back, and some things are in there. But that's what the report looks like. Next slide. The town of Babylon, after reading our report and after working with them, adopted an amendment to their code, which says that parking demand reduction, given the TOD nature of the area as part of the site plan review, applicants will be encouraged to explore techniques to reduce parking demand. Techniques may include but are not limited to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they required in their code to look at parking stall demand reduction. They don't require the implementation of them, but if an applicant comes to the board with those things, the board is in a better position to negotiate and approve a project. That's why the Village of Amityville did the same thing. This is what the code looks like. So what am I going to? Next slide. This is the Village Court, Port Jefferson's parking requirements. As you can see, a number of off-street parking are required by formula, okay? And then if you can't meet the formula, first thing you do is payment in lieu of parking. Village planning board here, the attorney's here. We had another conversation with the village attorney, and I want to correct the record once again. The village attorney, after listening to planning and our planning board attorney, has reversed his decision once again, that it is true that if you are short your parking, the code requires you to go right to the Board of Trustees for a pilot. It's silent on whether or not you can go to the ZBA and ask for forgiveness for some of those, and then go to the Board of Trustees and ask for 3 rather than 30, but our code says you go right to the Board of Trustees. All right, so doggy daycare, we kind of messed them up a little bit, but Conifer wants to go to the Board of Trustees, so we don't have to clarify that. But moving forward, that's the way the code is written. I want to change that. But anyway, that's the way it is. Payment in lieu of parking, or in the C1 district, you've got this. I don't even think that's, but there's no relief here. So what I would like to do is I would like to include, just like Amityville and Babylon, that language, similar language, but give the planning board the ability to waive the parking for parking stall demand reduction techniques. So if I can get that through the code, it would give you the authority to look at parking stall and say, okay, if you're gonna put a bus shelter over here, you're gonna get a certain reduction based on the literature, we can waive you 2 spaces over there. Is there another slide? Okay, so that's it. Is there another slide after that, or we put it forward? Okay, so that's the idea. So a couple of caveats. The point of diminishing returns. The Frankenstein project, I think we had like 10 parking stall demand reduction techniques all the way through. I had interns when I was with Suffolk County after we released that, and they were math majors. I said, okay, what's the point of diminishing returns? I forget now, but I think it might have been 5. 5 techniques you flatline, because now you're just hitting the same people over and over again. They've got the discount, they've got the prepaid transit dollars, and they're ride sharing with Cindy work every day. So there's a point of diminishing returns with these things. So we've looked at that.
Did that job get built?
Yes, that's my.
Oh, yes.
How's it working out?
Well, the municipality's got a really bad parking problem. This was the George Way, Patcho.
Yes, Patcho.
You know, right?
Right.
There's no project around it that will
You know
look
the
like that.
problems with that, 'cause I was involved with that, the tenant parking, is paid for, you gotta pay for, which they're not using, so they don't wanna pay for it. So it took, I said, I wanna go to work every day down there for, how many years, it became, as more tenants came in, and we were filling up all the retail and the restaurants, became very heavily going to the retail, the restaurants, the parking became a major issue.
They didn't,
Because here,
they waived the park, right? They got a variance on park. Yeah, but they waived, they gave it a variance.
because that was gonna be my comment, was I'm very curious with the percentage of you said you had studies that showed if you unbundled parking from your rent,
Yes,
that there was like a 20% reduction in
some reduction.
something. But if we did that here, people would just, they're residents, they can park for free.
That's caveat 2.
Yeah.
When it's a great concept, unbundling the cost of parking. I, put another $150 in my pocket, I'll be right in my car. What we found out though was that parking's so cheap in the village that they just took that car right out of that garage and put it into a municipal lot.
Yeah.
So that brings up a whole discussion of maybe we're charging not enough. It's not enough of a deterrent for people to just go and pay and park or pay overnight. Maybe we should charge overnight.
Wait,
So
no,
it's
because
free.
they're free.
They're free, right.
Maybe we should start saying that between the hours of 3 to 5 a.m.
No, for village residents, it's free.
Yes.
So
that
we either
became an
say,
issue.
guess what, if you're a village resident, but you live in this apartment complex, you don't get a parking permit.
So we're having discussions
I'm
with.
just saying,
No,
because
what we're
then.
saying is all village residents would not be able to park in this municipal lot overnight.
Right. So how would you manage that though? Like,
code enforcement like anything else, but.
so you just can't, so then if I'm drunk and I leave my car overnight, what, do I get ticketed or do, right, you know, like, I wanna make sure that people leave their cars. So they're not drinking and driving,
We
is what
understand
I'm
what you're
saying.
saying.
Yes.
We've been observing the Conifer project uptown for a couple of months. We've seen people going in and out of the building and parking overnight and all that, and we're trying to figure out why. Why would you wanna park in an unsecure surface parking lot, particularly uptown, as opposed to in a secure garage? They're not charging for the parking. No, they're not charging for the parking. No, so,
And are the cars that are out on the street actually from Conifer, or the people who live above the stores?
no, they are there overnight, and they've been observed going in after work hours, and then in the morning, people coming out. So I've said to the people that have been observing, they're coming out in their pajamas. I remember in college, in the morning, everybody's running from room to room in their pajamas,
Moving
because
their
they stayed
car.
overnight,
Oh.
right? So I'm wondering, are they just overnight visitors, some significant other coming out and going in? But that does not appear to be the case. What appears to be the case is it's less of a walk from the elevator in the lobby outside than it is from the elevator down into the garage to your parking spot. It's that, people are creatures of convenience, and 10 steps are making the difference, right?
Andy, here's the question. For Conifer 2, their current proposal, they're short 13 parking spaces, as we heard before.
13 or 17?
Whatever. If we allow them to have parking stall demand reduction because it's a POD and maybe they add bike racks,
We tried.
would that reduce the, could we say, hey, you're not Division 13, you're only Division 7?
Well, you can't do it now, because you don't have the authority to do it. But if we put something like that in the code,
The next Conifer 3, instead of saying you're not short 13, you're short a reduced number.
that's exactly the
Or
point.
not wall practice.
That's exactly the point. That you would get something for that variance. Right now, you're not getting anything. You're not getting any incentive to get people out of that extra car and get
All we're
rid of
getting
it.
is maybe a pilot. If they have.
Well, that's what we're getting, is a pilot. And historically, the pilot hasn't been going into parking lots.
And it's not consistent, like it's left to the trustees, and he assign a dollar amount. He may assign a dollar amount to one project that's very different than another.
Yes.
Should all, if a pilot, it should be it should be a set fee where if you need
But right
one
now-
parking spot is $10,000.
Yeah, but
So would you like pilot, to be at the planning board level? Because I think the trustees would love to get rid of pilot.
Well, it might be to be a consistent amount.
I think it should be a mixed motive.
$10,000, whatever the number is, so when
And
you're
if
short
we're-
13, that's, you know how much.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
developers
I think we should.
know what it
Yes.
is.
And then along those lines,
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah, that's right.
and then along those lines, if our goal is really to reduce the amount of cars, that number has to be significantly high in order to force developments to do the parking. Can you tell me that?
Parking stall.
Parking stall
Well,
demand reduction.
what do we been charging?
It has gone as low as $400 to as high as $750, I think.
It's ridiculous.
$750 if you, a one-time fee?
Not per spot.
But compared to other states, other counties, some places have 10,000 miles.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's just say we said to Conifer, listen, you're short 13 spaces, it's 10,000 spaces, 130,000. Or, for 130,000, you could put in bike lockers and a new bus shelter, and that would only cost you maybe 70,000, and we waive the rest.
The only issue with Conifer is that they did pay a pilot for the previous one, and I think they want to match the payment for the
For the
previous
future, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the future, I'm saying specifically Conifer, they.
But what I'm saying is if a developer comes in and he's short a certain amount,
Things
you know,
change.
Yeah.
Plus
But they also,
plus
like,
they
what-
did provide substantial.
What frustrates me
Oh, yeah,
is
A little different. It was
we have these
some
developments
state-
going in that are supposed to be transit oriented. And they're starting out with an empty space and they're creating problems. They're creating a parking problem. They're creating, they didn't do bike stalls. We wanted a very early on staff suggested, hey, why don't you have places for people to put their bikes? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? They refused. So unless Pilot is so abusive, unless it is so much of an incentive that they have to, in order to save that money, they have to do these things, or they have to provide all the parking.
It's not typical development, right? It's very constrained by the money that they're getting. It's all grant
Yes.
funded.
And they'll tell you that every time it's
Oh my gosh, but then they send their entire team.
Yeah.
But they are willing to pay the pilot, I mean, because the
Because
pilot
it
out
wasn't
city
all-
might pay
it's
for
not
something
all-
else.
Yeah.
But these things have been implemented, and for one reason or another, in Brooklyn, there were bike walkers at the train station.
No, but
And
this
what
is in the
happened-
apartment, like you have them in your apartment. So if you go into Brooklyn, a lot of the apartment complexes, they have this huge section at the bottom, and they have bike racks.
So you're saying all the new buildings that are being built, Conifer 1, Conifer 2?
No bikes, no,
There's no bike room
No.
at all?
nothing.
In fact, our own DPW, that was, when broached the subject, why don't we put a bus shelter in, because Suffolk County Bus goes right down Perry Street, hangs
Yeah.
left to hold,
Almost 20 grand for a shelter is too much.
Well, that wasn't the
Because
reason. That wasn't the reason. DPW said, can't do that in town, just turn into SROs.
Oh,
Limited. In
Yeah.
fact, Steve Gallagher said, see that concrete pad over there? He had a bus shelter there, he took it out.
yeah.
So
Well, I
there are
love the
practical
direction
difficulties.
that you're going, and I'm sure the parking committee is coming up with really good ideas. I love the direction. Definitely would like to see some of the background.
Yeah.
To try to get this in front of the mayor.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
like to see some of the
Yes.
studies that show all of those actual.
Do we have the link to the report?
Yeah, I'd love that. If you could email it to me, that'd be great.
Could you please email us the report?
I love that direction. I think that's the direction we should be going.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll make.
Made by Barbara, seconded by Gil. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'll leave it.